Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The meeting is now resumed and is in public session. We'll just check that it's okay, right? Before we begin, can I remind members to turn off their mobile phones completely as they interfere with the recording equipment. Governance at and funding to the Football Association of Ireland and related matters is the subject of our meeting this afternoon. The purpose of today's meeting is to consider all issues in relation to that. And in this regard, I would like to welcome Mr. Shane Ross TD, Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport, Mr. Brendan Griffin TD, Minister of State, and officials from the Department of Transport, Tourism and Sport, Mr. Ken Spratt, Assistant Secretary, Peter Hogan, Principal Officer, Betty Griffin, Assistant Principal, from Sport Ireland, Mr. John Tracy, Chief Executive, Mr. Kieran Mulvey, Chairman, Ms. Mary Dorgan, Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee and Sport Ireland Board Member, Mr. Colin McGinty, Director of Strategic Programmes. You're all very welcome. Before we commence, and for the purpose of witnesses attending, in accordance with procedures, I am required to read the following. By virtue of Section 17(2)(1) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence you are to give to the committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any person or persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against either a person outside the Houses or an official, either a name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. Now, just before I call Minister Ross, and after that, just give you the order, I'll call Minister Griffin to read their opening statements, and also after that then Mr. John Tracy. After that, the process we will have is, we've agreed that each member will ask questions and answers. There will be questions and answers for a period of 10 minutes. After 9 minutes, I'll tell the member that the 9 minutes have gone. And I presume, because we're taking both the Minister, his department and Sports Ireland together, members will direct their questions at whoever they wish, and whoever the appropriate person is, obviously the interaction would then take place. The question now is for Minister Ross to make his opening presentation, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. I'm joined today by Minister of State Brendan Griffin, who will follow me with an opening statement. At the outset, I would like to thank the committee for their tireless work on this matter and for the light they have shone on serious issues within the FAI. Investigative journalists have also played a commendable role, particularly Mark Tighe, who I wish to thank. I would also like to apologise to the committee for failing to provide my opening statement in advance as requested. As I'm sure you will appreciate, this has been a very fluid situation, including significant developments as late as this morning, which would have overtaken any script provided to you earlier. Chairman, I regret that there has been a cloud over Irish sport, and in particular Irish soccer, since the 17th of March, St Patrick's Day, when news broke about the loan of £100,000 to the Football Association of Ireland by its then Chief Executive, John Daly. On the 19th of March, we wrote to Sport Ireland, directing them to engage with the FAI to clarify matters of concern. Since then, there has been intensive activity between FAI, Sport Ireland and my department. The decision of the Board of Sport Ireland to withhold and suspend funding to the FAI was an extraordinary moment for Irish sport. I don't have to remind the committee of the scale and reach of the FAI. This is an organisation with over 200 employees, with an annual turnover of close to 60 million. But this is also an organisation with several thousand clubs, the national governing body for the most popular participation team sport in Ireland. While it may not be among our native sports, soccer is a sport which is at the heart of Irish life and culture. Chairman, it would be remiss of me not to mention the importance of due process and natural justice when dealing with these matters. While members of the committee are unfettered, the response by the officials of my department, by Sport Ireland, by Minister Griffin and by me must be considered and appropriate. Having said that, I watched the FAI's engagement with your committee and I have monitored developments since then. Last week's appearance, along with events over the weekend, have been hugely disappointing. Yesterday's announcement that the former CEO had voluntarily stepped aside pending an independent investigation fell far short of expectations. While it is the case that due process is hugely important, you will not be surprised to hear me say that I have become increasingly concerned with these developments. Here we have a clear case of the FAI admitting that they failed to abide by the conditions for receipt of state funding. We have had a shambolic appearance by the FAI at this committee last week, at which even the most basic questions, for whatever reasons, went unanswered. Concerns remain around a financial transaction, basic levels of corporate governance, the creation of the new Executive Vice President role, issues of a substantial nature being considered by the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement, and other developments that would suggest that all is far from well. Minister Griffin and I have made our serious concerns known. We have impressed upon Sport Ireland the need for root and branch reform of corporate governance. Over the weekend, I also publicly spoke about the need for strong corporate governance as a precondition for ongoing state funding, including capital works. As late as last night, we reiterated to Sport Ireland the need for regime change. As a result of the ongoing pressure, I am pleased to confirm to the committee that in the last few hours, the FAI has written to me indicating decisive action is being taken. I will now read the FAI's letter into the record of the meeting. Dear Minister, I would like to first of all apologise to you and your colleagues for any embarrassment caused through the Association's engagement with the Oireachtas Committee in relation to recent controversies. I can assure you that no disrespect was intended by me or the Association in relation to our engagement at the committee. While I am acutely aware that our response to date has caused considerable frustration and has not appeased public demands for action, I have a responsibility to ensure that we act legally and follow due process in relation to both employment matters and our engagement with the Officer of the Director of Corporate Enforcement. Since the controversies first arose, the Board of the Association formed a subcommittee to progress all issues involved, and this subcommittee has been working hard to try to ensure that all matters are fully investigated and that progress is made. The need to reform governance structures is recognised, and it is intended that we will put in place both structures and processes that meet best practice from both a corporate and sporting body perspective. We have already taken significant action in this regard. We have commissioned Mazars to undertake an in-depth review of all the matters of concern. This is a fully independent exercise which will be carried out to the highest professional standards and will be forensic in its approach. We are pursuing all steps with legal advice in relation to ensuring that all matters that arise from this review are actioned as appropriate. The processes that have been put in place are significant and will have far-reaching effect. They will, of necessity, however, take some time, having due regard to the need for detailed examination and to respect the rights of all individuals who may be involved. In relation to the board structure, we have engaged with Sport Ireland in relation to both the membership of and terms of reference for a new governance group which will, amongst other issues, bring forward proposals for the restructuring of the board and other governance requirements. We have asked that this group commence work immediately and bring forward recommendations as speedily as possible. It's our intention that recommendations in relation to restructuring the board will be brought to the membership for their consideration and adoption at our annual general meeting in July, or at an extraordinary general meeting if the work of the group facilitates an earlier date. At that point, when a new structure has been put in place, it is the intention that the existing board will step down to allow for a new board to be constituted in the best interests of football. It's our considered view that it is imperative that the Board would be allowed to facilitate the management of these processes to conclusion, and this will address in a very real way all of the concerns that have been raised in recent weeks. It also provides that this resolution is managed in conformity with UEFA and FIFA statutes regarding governance. In the interest of all players, coaches, volunteers, fans, employees and sponsors and government stakeholders, we are utterly committed to ensuring that the FAI moves to a position where trust and confidence is restored. I hope that this letter will provide some assurance in this regard. Yours sincerely, Donald Conway, President of the FAI. I want to welcome the fact that the FAI is engaging with Sport Ireland in a process, and that they have now indicated that the Board will step down. I believe that an EGM should be called before the July date, as soon as the active investigations have been concluded, to facilitate a transition to a new Board by way of a transparent elections. Given the growing lack of public confidence in the FAI, this move is to be welcomed, and it is hopefully the first step on the road to rebuilding trust in this important NGB. Considering the issues over which most of this Board has presided, and those issues being obvious even before the various investigations have started, it is clearly time for a regime change. As regards government funding, I welcome the swift and decisive action of the Board of Sport Ireland to suspend and withhold their funding. I can add that there will be no further government funding for the FAI until we see real change and reform in the association's corporate governance and until we have received credible answers. With regard to future allegations under the Sports Capital Programme and the large-scale Sport Infrastructure Fund, I will be closely monitoring developments on corporate governance and the conditions which must be met before Sport Ireland's funding to the association is reinstated. In this regard, no new capital payments will be made by my department to the FAI until I am satisfied with the new measures put in place. I am pleased that the FAI will work with Mazars to overhaul the association's governance. I think it's well known that I have great difficulty with organisations conducting internal reviews and investigations. So I welcome the invitation by the FAI to Sport Ireland to input the terms of reference of the Mazars exercise. I trust that the FAI will continue to liaise with Sport Ireland throughout this challenging process and in implementing any changes recommended therein. As Minister, I have responsibility for a considerable number of appointments to state boards, and I'm well aware of the importance of appointing individuals with a broad range of skills and experience, particularly in this context, financial and legal experience. The FAI should take meaningful steps to improve the process for the election of its board and to implement any recommendations with regard to the appointment of independent directors. Irish football, as we have heard, includes a broad range of stakeholders extending far beyond the FAI's headquarters at the National Sports Campus. On the new board, it would be appropriate to include representatives of the players, both male and female, supporters, coaches, volunteers and leagues. Chairman, it's been abundantly clear over the past weeks that there is an immense frustration throughout grassroots soccer in Ireland. We have also seen protests at recent international matches and at League of Ireland fixtures. Every committee member has received a huge number of letters and emails from volunteers and supporters across the country who are furious with the leadership of the association and the way it has responded to the recent controversy. Many have also highlighted other issues which are extremely important for the future of soccer in Ireland, such as youth development, participation of women and girls, and the challenges faced by League of Ireland clubs. It is now time to convene a stakeholders forum to allow representatives from every level of football in Ireland, from the international team to the schoolboys leagues, from the local community clubs to those playing in the League of Ireland's Premier Division, to come together to shape the future for their association and for their sport. This is quite the crisis for the FAI, but it is also an opportunity to develop an inclusive vision for the development of soccer in Ireland. Minister Griffin and I will facilitate that long overdue conversation. Chairman, I will welcome the committee's observations and any questions that you'll have.
Thank you, Minister. Just before I call Minister Brendan Griffin, I think it's appropriate that I would welcome the regime change in the FAI, which you've referred to in your letter. I think it's hugely important, and I think what's also important that you do hold a stakeholders forum that is as broad and as representative as possible to ensure what everybody wants is the best soccer teams at local, regional, national and international level that we can possibly have. So that's very positive news. So I just ask now if Minister Brendan Griffin would read his opening statement, please.
I would like to say at the outset that I am a long-standing supporter of Irish soccer and of the teams who have represented our country on the world stage. This present situation is extraordinary. Of course, there has been friction for a long time within the Football Association of Ireland. Many have been critical of the association's leadership. The League of Ireland has had particular challenges, and there have been calls for more investment from the association, more support for clubs and players. At the same time, there has been great progress made in relation to grassroots soccer. The inclusive nature of Irish soccer is remarkable, with teams and competitions for all, regardless of gender, level of ability, ethnicity, socio-economic background or age. And I've been hugely impressed by the ambition of the FAI to host international competitions, including next year's Euro 2020 games at the Aviva Stadium. As Minister Ross mentioned, the questions being asked by this committee and Sport Ireland are being asked by soccer supporters throughout the country. We understand that individuals are entitled to be treated fairly and to due process. No one wants to see a trial by media of people who have worked hard for their sport over many years. However, I am incredibly disappointed by the lack of answers from the FAI. Chairman, as the members will be well aware, those of us selected to Dáil and Shannon have a responsibility to the people of Ireland to ensure that public funds are used wisely, carefully and to deliver real outcomes across all programmes. When we are speaking of an organisation like the FAI, whose public funding represents a modest proportion of its total income, there are limits to what we can do. I want to say to members that I share their frustration. No one who witnessed Wednesday's meeting with the FAI could feel differently. As I see it, there is an obligation on us, the government, to use any levers of influence we have to ensure that the FAI provides Sport Ireland, its own members and all supporters of Irish soccer with a full explanation of the circumstances of the 2017 loan and with assurances that failures in oversight and governance have been addressed. My department's Sports Capital programme is one such lever. Of course, the vast majority of capital grants go directly to sports clubs and organisations throughout the country. There is no suggestion that we would penalise local soccer clubs for issues in their national association. However, national governing bodies of sport may also apply, and the FAI has been directly allocated a total of €130,000 under the programme since 2016. All payments under the Sports Capital programme are made retrospectively following receipt of, inter alia, proof of payment of the relevant invoices and a signed certificate of compliance with the terms and conditions of the programme. The National Sports Policy, which we published last July, provided for a large-scale sport infrastructure fund, the LSSIF, with at least 100 million available over the coming years. The fund was launched in November 2018 and closes for applications tomorrow. The fund is confined to national governing bodies of sport and local authorities, all of which received letters inviting them to make applications. The new fund has generated huge interest, and I expect that it will take a number of months to have all applications assessed by our officials and recommendations made on allocations. As Minister Ross has indicated, no new capital payments, and just can I correct the records there and what was circulated, no new capital payments will be made by our department to the FAI until we are satisfied that they have given us a full and complete account of the 2017 loan, until we have seen the outcome of the governance review, until meaningful change has been implemented on the basis of the findings of that review, and until all other relevant conditions have been complied with. The Sports Capital programmes are a hugely important resource for the Irish sporting sector, and I am sure that this will be true of the new large-scale sporting infrastructure fund also. In the interests of fairness to all applicants, we must insist that the FAI addresses these serious concerns before any payments to that organisation can be considered. Finally, Chairman, I would like to remind the FAI and its board that there are further risks for the association if they fail to satisfactorily address the questions and concerns which have been outlined. If we conclude after a due process that there are lingering doubts over governance and that appropriate recommendations for improvement are not being implemented, then the risks for the FAI would be considerable. However, as things stand, the FAI board have problems and they have time to address those problems, and I hope that they use that time wisely. Thank you, Chairman.
Just before I ask John Tracy, Chief Executive of Sports Ireland, to make his opening statement, just people outside mightn't be aware that has come to our notice here that proper books of accounts are not being kept by the FAI, and that Form H4 has been filed in the Company Registrations Office yesterday with effective date the 12th of April, so that will inform people listening in exactly what's going on. So I now ask Mr. John Tracy to please make his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm joined today by my colleagues Kieran Mulvey, Chairman, Mary Dorgan, who is Chair of our Audit and Risk Committee, and Colin McGinty, Director of Strategic Programmes. Sport Ireland appeared before this committee on Wednesday, April 3rd, where we gave a comprehensive account of our dealings with the Football Association of Ireland, including our funding to the organisation and the control mechanisms and management arrangements relating to this grant funding. Today we will take this opportunity to provide the committee with an update on developments since Sport Ireland last appeared, including the significant decision of the Board of Sport Ireland to suspend and withhold funding to the FAI. Before continuing, I would like to give Sport Ireland's view on the meeting of the committee with representatives of the FAI on Tuesday last. Sport Ireland had the expectations that the FAI would engage with this committee in an open and transparent manner on all relevant issues and answer the committee's key questions as directly and straightforwardly as possible. The FAI delegation chose not to answer important questions, which was extremely disappointing. Nevertheless, through the committee hearing, Sport Ireland learned some information that we did not previously know from correspondence and meetings with the FAI. This new information gives an insight into corporate governance practices in operation within the FAI. We now understand the following. Not only were Sport Ireland not notified of a material deterioration in the FAI financial position in 2017, it appears that the board of the FAI were similarly not notified. That such a serious financial situation existed and was not reported to the FAI board is concerning from an internal financial control and general governance perspective. The events of 2017, as ascribed by the FAI, gives rise to serious concerns on the FAI's board's application of its governance and oversight role as required under Sport Ireland's terms and conditions of grant approval. As a state body that invests substantial funds in the FAI, Sport Ireland is also very concerned about the FAI's adherence to appropriate internal financial and management control procedures during this period. Following the 3rd of April meeting of this committee, Sport Ireland again wrote to the President of the FAI on April 4 seeking a response on behalf of the board of the FAI. A copy of this letter has been provided to the committee. On the afternoon of Friday the 5th of April, I received a call from the President of the FAI seeking a meeting with him that evening. Sport Ireland agreed, and a constructive meeting with the President and 2 members of the board of the FAI took place at Sport Ireland offices that evening, with Sport Ireland represented by the Chairman, Chief Executive, myself and Colin McGinty. At that meeting, the President of the FAI provided to Sport Ireland a written response to our letter of April 4th. A copy of this letter was also being provided to this committee. At the meeting, the context of the letter was discussed at length and the following actions agreed. The outcome of the Grant Thornton ongoing internal review of the Association's book will be provided to Sport Ireland. The terms of reference of the review by Mazars will be provided to Sport Ireland once they are finalised. Sport Ireland will be consulted by Mazars as part of their review process. Mazars' full and final report will be provided to us in a timely manner. Their review by consultants Jonathan Hall and Associates will be provided to Sport Ireland. The FAI will discuss the composition of the new governance review group with Sport Ireland. Sport Ireland issued a formal response to this letter on Thursday, April 11th. A copy of this letter has been provided to the committee. As outlined to the committee on April 3rd, the Sport Ireland Act confers considerable authority in Sport Ireland, and this is reinforced by our responsibility in investing substantial amounts of public funding into sport. As a statutory agency, we seek to develop a strong sporting organisations and recognise the considerable public interest in a successful Irish sports sector. That said, we are also mindful of the limits of Sport Ireland's legal powers, and we respect the autonomy of the national governing bodies of sport. Sport Ireland is responsible for the investment of public money in sport and subsequently oversight and accountability of this investment. All procedures and interactions with the NGB reflect this responsibility. At our meeting on Tuesday, the 9th of April, the Board of Sport Ireland unanimously made a decision to suspend and withhold funding to the FEI. This decision followed a lengthy discussion with the Board in relation to the 100,000 loan and related matters. The suspension and withholding of funding to the NGB is not a decision that the Board of Sport Ireland takes lightly. It is typically an intervention of last resort, and it is only ever used very reluctantly. Sport Ireland is acutely aware that this action causes uncertainty and disruption to delivery of very important strategic programmes. However, Sport Ireland is ultimately responsible for the security and accountability of approximately 2.9 million in public funding invested in the FEI. In the course of the Board's discussion, it was noted that in the FEI's written opening statement submitted to this committee ahead of last week's hearing, the FEI acknowledged that Clause 4.3 of the future reporting section of Sport Ireland terms and condition of grant approval was not met. This relates to 2017, whereby the FEI did not notify Sport Ireland of any material deterioration in its financial position. Notwithstanding some positive steps taken by the FEI in the preceding days, it has been acknowledged by the FEI they were in breach of Clause 4.3. For the committee's reference, Clause 4.3 states, in addition, each organisation undertakes to notify Sport Ireland in writing without delay in the event of any material deterioration in its financial position or in any other matter which may jeopardise the organisation's overall financial viability or its ability to comply with its commitment in the approval submission, and therefore to provide Sport Ireland with such information and documentation as Sport Ireland may request in connection with the relevant matter and any steps being taken to rectify it. In light of this clear acknowledgement, the Board of Sport Ireland made this decision to suspend and withhold funding to the FEI in accordance with Clause 1.1 of Sport Ireland Terms and Conditions of Grant Approval. In making this significant decision, the Board of Sport Ireland is aware that 50% of the youth field sport grant funding had been paid to the FEI in 2019. The next payment to the FEI is due in the third quarter of this year. The Board of Sport Ireland, in its deliberations to suspend and withhold funding outlined above, were of the clear view that an interim period should be used, interim period should be used by the FEI to take whatever actions are required to enable Sport Ireland to restore funding. On a limited number of occasions in the past where Sport Ireland had concerns about governance and financial controls and has acted to suspend and withhold funding to a sporting body, the following process has been followed. Number one, the audit of the sporting body, an audit of the governing sporting body's governance and financial control is undertaken. Two, the establishment of a liaison process with the sporting body to closely monitor, verify and support the NGB's implementation of the audit recommendations and to verify compliance with the terms and conditions of grant approval. 3. The liaison process is overseen by Sport Ireland's Audit and Risk Committee with periodical updates and recommendations made to the Board. 4. Grant funding is withheld until sufficient progress has been made on implementing the audit recommendations and governance and financial control issues have been progressed. And 5. Once progress is made on implementing the audit recommendations and assurance are received of the effectiveness of governance and financial controls, staggered payments are generally made to the NGB in question. Sport Ireland will follow the established process with the FEI as it has in the past with other NGBs where similar situations has arisen. Sport Ireland Audit and Risk Committee meets on April 18th and will discuss the specific requirements from a government and financial control perspective that will be required of the FEI. The Audit and Risk Committee is also scheduled to meet again in May and will review FEI progress. The Executive of Sport Ireland, with an oversight of our Audit and Risk Committee and the Board, will continue to liaise and meet with the FEI to progress all important matters. The Board of Sport Ireland has agreed to review the decision when it is satisfied that the FEI has addressed its current governance and financial issues. Important steps in this regard include, but not limited to, the completion of the Mazars review, the adoption of the recommendation by the and the adoption of these recommendations by the FEI, the completion of the Grant Thornton review, and the adoption of the corrective actions by the FEI. Depending on what emerges from the Mazars and Grant Thornton review, we will also consider a full audit to the FEI by Sport Ireland appointed auditors as per Sport Ireland's terms and conditions of grant approval. We have agreed with the FEI that a full audit will be carried out with them, and that was agreed with them last night. The scope will be defined by Sport Ireland Audit and Risk Committee and will be set with reference to our satisfaction with the scope and findings of the Mazars review. In light of the acknowledgement by the FEI that there was a breach in terms and conditions, this audit will be as broad and extensive as necessary to satisfy Sport Ireland that the FEI is compliant with our terms and conditions of grant approval, including that its internal financial controls and management, as well as its general governance, are of sufficient standard in order to restore funding. The specific mechanisms to satisfy Sport Ireland of the effectiveness of the FEI governance and systems of internal financial control will be proportionate to the significant level of Sport Ireland investment in the organisation. One specific requirement will be informed by the response of the FEI during the liaison process. Sport Ireland is also very cognizant of the FEI's engagement with the Office of Director of Corporate Enforcement on their particular inquiries, which we understand to be substantial. We will continue to closely observe this process with keen interest. With regards to the next steps, Sport Ireland has accepted the FEI's offer of engagement with the FEI on the composition of the new governance review group to include a majority of external members and to assist in identifying external chairperson. Sport Ireland has identified a potential candidate who is Aidan Horn, a director of the Institute of Public Administration, and he will take up that role, and that has been agreed with the FEI. The terms of reference of this group will be agreed with Sport Ireland and finalised by the group once it is established. Noting the FEI's board's ability to appoint an independent person to this.
John, do we have this information?
Is this additional to your statement?
It just came. We had a meeting with them last night.
So we have not been given this. This
No,
is
not
different
yet.
to what you gave us just before the meeting.
Yeah, it's just the one little piece here. Yeah, we had a meeting with them last night, and we finished our meeting at 7 o'clock last night.
Well, I think with respect to the members, we would like to get copies of the additional statement content you have there.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think you're nearly finished your statement.
I nearly
on
finished.
the-
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you arrange, your staff arrange? to
Yeah,
have
we
that,
can.
please?
Yeah. Noting the FEI's ability to appoint an independent person to the subcommittee examining these matters, Sport Ireland will nominate also a person with relevant experience to sit on the committee. In light of our role as a development agency, Sport Ireland will also seek to expedite the level of additional governance support, training and assistance that can provide to all NGBs. This will include a chairpersons network to bring together the NGB's chairpersons for consideration and discussion of topics of mutual interest, share ideas and learning, and to inform the development of good public governance. This is in accordance with actions already identified in the Government's National Sports Policy. Sport Ireland is aware that the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport and the Minister for Tourism will also have additional questions for us and requirements of the FEI. Sport Ireland has no role in the Sports Capital Programme beyond that applied to the provision of large-scale national projects on the sports campus. In this regard, Sport Ireland will liaise with the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport before any decision is taken to restore funding to the FEI. The Board of Sport Ireland has agreed to keep the FEI's progress in relation to all issues under review at each and every board meeting. Sport Ireland will continue to provide non-financial assistance and guidance to the FEI, which may be helpful in advancing matters. Sport Ireland is again due to meet with representatives of the FEI, which was last night, and an update of the meeting will be given at this meeting.
Can I just say, just before I open it to the floor, that the additional information that you're giving us, obviously we have to get a copy of it, and it's been copied now. But just for clarity, the pieces that are new again, I just have one question. Are you saying on page 5 that there was an agreement last night for a full audit? Because your statement says that you would consider it rather than actually doing it. So
yes.
Could you explain that, please?
Under our Act, we have limited powers under our Act in terms of full audit. We can only follow the money, which is the 5 million, as we explained in this committee at our last meeting, right, at the last meeting here. It was agreed with the FEI that we would carry out a full audit, a deep dive.
Would that be a forensic audit?
It will be as extensive as we need it to be.
Not the question I'm asking.
Can I maybe just
Sure.
just add to it a piece? The piece that became apparent to us yesterday is the Mazars review will be a full investigation into the issues that have come into the public domain, and that will be forensic in nature as outlined in the FEI's letter. That piece, and we've also said that the audit will also bear in mind the findings of the Mazars report when we are conducting our own audit.
So just on the point of information, if I'm reading it correctly, FAI are saying they will have an in-depth review. I don't see the word, or is there will. It would be a forensic in its approach.
It'll be a forensic if needed.
If needed.
Yeah.
But surely it's needed. That's the point.
I think the Mazars piece will be forensic in nature, as outlined.
I'll go to the parties.
Just what we've said is this: we will review where that is at, and our audit will also be forensic in nature if we need it to be.
But it won't be forensic initially. Now, the agreement of speakers will be Captain Murphy, Deputy Murphy, Deputy Rock, Deputy Troy, Deputy Munster, Deputy Coppinger, and Shandor Céidigh, and Shandor O'Mahony, Deputy O'Keefe, and Shandor Feighan, and Shandor Daly. And then we do a second round, and then that will be 10 minutes of questioning. So we just to make sure that members are happy that the additional information is now being circulated. I would express my concern that we're only getting it now. We held people a task last week for introducing a full statement, so this is additional information, and I think we should have had it before this meeting commenced. Sorry, Deputy Murphy, please. Your 10 minutes start now.
Okay, thank you, and you're very welcome. I think in the first instance, I think people who are really interested and love the sport will be both embarrassed and angry over what has transpired over recent months, but probably not surprised, because there has been a problem for a very long time. Can I ask you, did you know about the letter to the CRO, or the submission of the Form H4 to the CRO in advance of meeting the FAI last night?
No.
So does that change the dynamics in that? I presume the ODCE will now get involved, and
yes.
they will themselves do an audit.
Yes, they will.
And that will be as extensive as it requires to be.
Yes.
Will you engage with the ODCE
Yes, we will.
in relation to that?
Yes.
And obviously there could be very significant penalties.
Yeah. We will engage with the ODC if we're required to do it. Absolutely.
Do you have any idea of the timeline associated with that?
We only read about it this morning ourselves.
Right. Okay. And I mean, obviously that could end up in the criminal code.
Yeah.
So we're precluded once it gets into that area. But we've been notified about that at this stage. I mean, obviously, the very fact that there's government funding allocated to an organisation like the FAI gives it legitimacy across the board, and in fact, it could have a bearing on other income streams as a consequence of that. So this is really important in terms of not doing more damage than needs to be done. So you might come back to us and let us know just exactly what the timeline, how the ODC will get involved, how that will play out, how and how that can be managed, because you know, where you have outlined the conditions for the restoration of future funding, that changes that quite considerably.
It does, yeah.
Would you say that there's a need for more powers for Sport Ireland as a consequence of this?
We said the last time when we were in here that we didn't want to be a regulatory body. We're a development agency, and I think if that dynamics change, it will change things. The power of audit is we follow the money, the state money, and for larger organisations, our funding is 3 million out of a budget of 50 million, and we're limited by that.
Okay, well, we might need to come back and look at that again when the dust settles on this, and hopefully that it won't be so far into the future that there is huge long-term damage done. There was a previous experience with the OCI, for example, and money was withheld. How long did it take for that money to be restored?
It took the best part of nearly 9 months until they had the corporate structures in place, and it did take the best part of 9 months. It takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a long time to put all the structures in place, and the FEI are not at that stage yet. They have to have an AGM. The OCI got on and held an AGM fairly quickly. They had new board members in place, and that's a good model actually in terms of what needs to happen.
In actual fact, I just reminded myself of some of the main findings of the Moran report, which obviously inquired into that debacle. And leadership style was characterised, Patrick Hickey's leadership style was characterised by strong personal control over decision making. It was an autocratic style of leadership. There was an overdependence on the power of one individual. The inquiry has a concern about the possible absence of control in the operation of the OCI's bank accounts. I mean, it has been completely turned around since. It found best accountancy practices were not followed. Do you think that there's a correlation between the two from what you've seen so far?
They're very similar. Strong personality leading an organisation. And this is probably one of the issues that we've discussed with the FEI in recent times, and I did say it to him at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, is the impression that was out there was the FEI board were following as opposed to leading the organisation. And that was fairly clear. That type of regime needs to absolutely be reversed. The board leads any organisation.
Okay, thank you. In relation to that, Minister Ross, I addressed this issue with you 2 years ago. Ironically, it was in 2017, and I stated that the Genesis report from, as it was then 13 years ago, looked for 2 independent directors of the board, which could have made a sizable difference, and you agreed with me, but it doesn't appear that anything was done about it. Do you regret that at this stage?
Yeah, I think it would have been far better if something had been done about it, and I think...
But you're the minister now.
Sorry?
You were the minister.
But that's absolutely right. It would have been far better if something had been done about it. Of course it would. And if there had been independent members put on the board. You shouldn't exaggerate my powers as minister with the FAI. I don't have control of the board. I don't make appointments to the board. We contribute 5% in terms of grants. And what we have done, we've made representations to the FAI when they were making their changes in accordance with corporate governance earlier this year to indicate that we weren't totally satisfied with what was happening.
Can I just make the point that the real leverage is the money. We can see that the dynamic changed when the money changed, when the money was withheld. Minister, there was a sizable grant allocated, and there was quite a debate went on between your department and Sports Ireland and the FAI, and it was, don't begrudge a penny of it, totally needed for women's football. But it was an opportunity where there was leverage there to insist on that change. Do you regret that you didn't do that? Because you say you don't have much power, but we can see that the power really works when you withhold money.
We were constantly, obviously, making it clear what we thought, and what our view was of corporate governance, particularly independence, particularly women, particularly the fact that the longevity of people on the board was something which worried us. We certainly, in retrospect, regret a lot of things that happened. That particular payment to which you referred was a payment of €195,000. And that was a payment which was made because of the appalling conditions in which women in sport. Let me just finish because it's very important.
So you know I'm very tight time-wise.
Yeah, of course. The appalling conditions which women had to suffer, particularly on the international scene, and we're all familiar with that. We made actually a direction to Sport Ireland to produce that money after representation was made to us. But it was because it was a very, very urgent case. It was very well publicised, and women needed that money.
But you could have done more in relation to insisting on a governance change, the very change that was sought in the Genesis report of independence on the board. For example, we got a document from the department on the 10th of April, and it told us about the changes that were likely to happen that would have pushed out changes on the board 2022, 2024. Very tame, move like an iceberg, really. The board member who is the chairperson of a standing committee or a National League Executive Committee, and who has served more than 10 years on the board, may be re-elected for up to 4 years. Every one of them would have fulfilled that criteria. You know, this problem didn't happen on the 17th of March. I mean, there was a very good piece of journalism done that opened up a window on this by Mark Tighe. Yeah. But this has been a problem way before that, and you know, I would say that the department needs to learn a very big lesson in relation to money and power, in relation to making changes where something like this appears. And I've got to say, I'm disappointed that we've come to this point, and I think some of it could have been avoided if that independence on the board had been in place when it should have been in place. Can I just make mention of the Jonathan Hall report? There was great. There's a relationship between this and indeed what was said about Pat Hickey at the time and the importance to the OCI and how it was vital to have this person on the OCI. The OCI is transformed. It's not, you know, this idea that there is that one person can, you know, is absolutely central to the organisation. It seems to me, I'm sure you've read the report at this stage, that report was written with one thing in mind, and that was to deliver you know, a situation where John Delaney could stay as a member of the UEFA board. You know, essentially.
To be brief, and I get the answer to your question, and your time is up, but there will be a second round.
Yeah, okay.
But I think if we get the answer to your question, sir.
Do you think that's a fair comparison?
As I say, we weren't consulted on the Jonathan Hall report. We read about it in the newspaper like everyone else. I think it's a fair comparison. No one is expendable, and sometimes an organisation needs to move on. and put new people in to drive it forward. And I think that's been our experience with the OCI. They're a totally different type of organisation now than they were, and where they're leading from the front. And even only last week, we did an event with them where they had a Japanese over for where the Tokyo training camp is going to be. They had their ticketing agency announced, where essentially the priority will be to ensure that parents and families have their tickets. And in the collaboration and the team management that was put in place with the OCI, which will be made up of Sport Ireland Institute people and the Olympic Federation. And it is totally and utterly, that organisation has totally and utterly transformed itself in a very short period of time, led by people that know corporate governance and know it extremely well, they know what's good and they know what's right, and that's what they're putting in place.
Thank you. Okay, now move to Deputy Rock. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Chair, just let us know.
I wish to split my time with Senator O'Mahony.
So we'll let you know when 4 minutes are up then in both cases. Okay.
5, yep. Or 4, sure. Yep. First of all, I'd like to add to what Deputy Murphy said. I don't believe any sporting organisation should be a personal fiefdom. And in that vein, Minister Ross, we might start with you, if you don't mind. Based on what we see and what we know here, do you have an understanding if the FAI have accepted Mr Delaney's offer to step aside? This has been a point of confusion from the FAI statements.
I can't give any, absolutely no indication of that at all. I'm not privy to what happened.
Mr Tracy, given you met with the FAI last evening, do you have an indication?
I don't really know what's going on. I know there is, he has voluntarily stepped aside, from what I gather. I believe he is still on the payroll while this investigation by Mazars is going on. That's all. That's as much as I know.
So to clarify, the offer to voluntarily step aside has been accepted by the FAI in your understanding?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, because the statement, once again, we've received many statements.
That's my understanding.
Some of which contradicted each other. This one was particularly unclear, and as far as I understand, the media were refused answers to it last night. So I just wanted to get that on the record as your understanding. Minister, in your statement and in the FAI's letter, it says the board are stepping down. Is this as part of the normal course of events, as in they'll step down and potentially seek re-election, or is it your understanding that they're stepping down to not seek re-election again?
Let me answer that question. I got this only late this morning, this letter. I haven't communicated with anybody about it at all. It came as a surprise to me. So what's in the letter is in the letter. I can't really expand on it in any way at all. But my reading of the letter is that the entire board will step down. Okay. Whether they offer themselves for re-election or not is a matter I can't throw any light on whatsoever.
With regard to your own opening statement, Minister, it's interesting in the written version of it, which perhaps we don't have an electronic copy of yet, you might provide it. You say independent in inverted commas in relation to the reviews being undertaken. Why in inverted commas, Minister? Do you not believe they're truly independent reviews?
It's because it was called an independent independent investigation by those who set it up. That's why, simply.
Nothing else appears in inverted commas. Just the word independent, not review.
Yep.
Just independent.
That's correct.
Is it your view that it's a truly independent review if the terms of reference are set by the association under investigation?
I don't know whether it's independent at this stage.
So you don't know why only that word was in inverted commas? No. Okay.
It's simply there because it's a quotation of what they're saying.
Well, the other words aren't, but we'll leave that there. Do you feel... Sorry, pardon me, Mr. Mulvey.
Yeah, I might be able to add, because at our engagement with the FAI yesterday evening, and Chairman, I apologise for the late name, but we were trying to work on this overnight.
Sure, of course.
I apologise, and we'll give that detail to the deputies about the independent chairperson of the corporate review, whom we have nominated. Yesterday, our delegation with the FAI had an opportunity to look at, on a confidential basis, the Mazars proposal that is going, the terms of reference, which are going to the Office of Corporate Enforcement for approval. But certainly on reading it, as I saw it, it will be an extensive investigation is the phrase used, which will also have senior counsel attached to it. But these terms of reference, Chairman and members of the committee, have to be agreed with the Office of Corporate Enforcement because they relate to matters under company law. But
I don't think the corporate enforcement people do it themselves rather than Mazars.
I don't know, Chairman. I presume there's a conversation going on between them as to whether it would be normal or whether this, what I know of the Office of Corporate Enforcement in different regards is they usually, you're quite right, Chairman, appoint the road inspectors.
Because Mazars are appointed by the existing board.
Yeah.
I'm not casting any doubts on them, but it doesn't look totally transparent to me if that's what's happening. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, how do those reviews interact precisely, Mr. Mulvey? I mean, is it the case that the ODCE will have a separate parallel inquiry, or is it now somehow dovetailing with the Mazars inquiry? I'm a bit unclear on that.
I think that I can understand everyone's confusion because we're trying to get over some of this confusion as well, Deputy.
Of course.
There is, as we understand it, the Mazars, which is phrased within the terms of reference that are currently being discussed with the Office of Corporate Enforcement, the phrase investigation. Okay. That will also have senior counsel. That is over a wide range of issues, largely relating to financial issues within the FAI that have come to all of our attention in recent days, including as late as last Sunday.
Will that include, and sorry to cut across you, Mr. Mulvey, will that include things like Mr. Teich's report in the Sunday Times on
my
expenses?
understanding, Deputy, from what I read, I had a cursory read of it. I didn't have possession of the document. I wasn't...
Board expenses?
Well, I would understand those issues will be covered and are listed to be covered in the document. I went
things
through
like third-party
I was trying
payments.
to go through it in the limited time I had forensically as best I could. But Deputy, certainly all of those are listed for investigation.
Mr. Tracy nodded the third-party payments, just to clarify.
My understanding is, yes, that is included.
And all third-party payments.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the Form H4 being filed, is obviously a significant development. It's a serious development. Only 2 other such forms have been filed with the CRO in the last 12 months. This is something of great gravity. Has any organisation and recipient of grant funding from you before had a Form H4 filed against it?
Not that we're aware of. Never heard of it before.
Okay.
So we're hearing about this for the first time. We heard about it this morning.
So it's a significant development in and of itself. And under section, well, look, we'll get into that later on, perhaps. We won't get too deep into company law, bearing in mind I only have 1 minute remaining.
No, you haven't. You're actually 2 minutes over, believe it or not.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Sorry. Can I just close on one yes or no question then in that case?
I gave you extra latitude because I asked questions.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Minister Ross, based on what you've heard and based on what Chairman O'Dowd has said, do you feel, in your personal opinion and in your ministerial opinion, that there is a need for a full forensic audit of the FAI?
I would say that there's a very good case for it, and I wouldn't in any way oppose it if it was thought to be necessary. There is no reason why that should not take place.
So it's a yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Could I just ask maybe both the Minister and the Sport Ireland, John, in relation to the FAI said last week here that they wanted to regain trust and proper governance, and everything they have done since this became public knowledge is evidence to demonstrate that they're actually doing the opposite to regain that trust. And I won't go into last week's meeting. Everyone has commented enough on that already. But even last night, John and Kieran, with your meeting with FAI Ireland, they obviously didn't refer to your H4 or the H4, which I see from the letter here was complaint was filed on the 12th of April, which was last Friday. So we have in an answer to a question to me about the Mazars report last Wednesday, they said that it was for FAI eyes only, that it wouldn't be published. And now, thankfully, you have got assurances in your meetings that it will be published and all of that. But what the point I'm saying is that they're being brought kicking and screaming, and this is ongoing to the present time. I'd just like both your comments on that, and I'll especially in relation to the restoration of funds, because everyone admits that we have a lot of innocent parties on the front line who are suffering and will continue to suffer, but there is no way that funding can be restored in the timely fashion. We'll say, I think it was August was mentioned for the second 50% or thereabouts, with all that's going on with the board stepping down, all the audits that are going to go on as a result of this H4 letter, I'm sure, and also you mentioned about your own Sport Ireland's audit. Who's doing that audit on your behalf, for instance? Has that been decided yet? And will it be publicly available once it's done? So I'll just start off with that. What's the scope? And what is the scope of that audit?
Our audit will we went to tender yesterday for it, or a few weeks ago to do it, and we had no takers. So, but we will be now out looking for auditors to do the work. We agreed last night with the FEI that it would be extensive as we want it to be, which is definitely a step in the right direction. And it's an indication, it was one indication to me that some members of the FEI are trying to do the right thing. And so that was good to know that they were willing to let us have an extensive audit. So we will be doing this as quickly as we can, but there's a piece, the Mazars work needs to start and get going. That's an investigation. We need to bear that in mind when we're doing our piece of work. But we would like to be seen getting this going probably in May at some stage, which is a degree of urgency. But you're right, Deputy or Senator. All these things take time. And the nature of Mazars and what we saw last night in the terms of reference is very extensive. And they were talking about a 6 to 8 week interim period, report, and then a more extensive. That's only an interim period, so it'll be quite a while. In
reality, there's going to be no restoration of funds in the next year, is there?
Well, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done over the next year, over the next 6 months, or 3 months, 4 months. But I think there's a number of steps that can be taken by an FAI board in terms of advancing the corporate governance structure. We'll get our audit done. As we had all the indications down through the years from their auditors that the taxpayers' money was expended for the purposes in which it was given. We have that letter every year from their auditors. So we'll be doing all that piece of work. And if there is some assurances, and if there is, and there's a big if, we do have a mechanism whereby we can actually fund on a monthly basis, right? And account for the money that would be going specifically for a position. But that's an issue when all the various bits and pieces have been done. There's advancement in terms of this corporate governance piece. We have an audit completed. We know the ODCE will take some time. We know that Mazars will take some time. But we would begin to get a flavour. And if there's an AGM of an organisation and there's a new board in place, and all these kind of factors do play into being possibly in a position where you might be able to make a decision. But if you're not ready to make a decision, we won't make a decision, and that is key here.
Yeah. Sorry, just who I know I'm time constrained. Who will carry out the audit?
We haven't identified.
Okay, sorry. Minister, could I just ask for your comment, and also you clarified about the large infrastructural funds at the weekend, and that they wouldn't be given, or they couldn't be allocated until everything is in order. Surely now, with all of this that's going on, there's, when had you intended, or when was it intended to make announcements on the large-scale structural funds, firstly? And secondly, does this mean possibly that there'll be a total delay on announcing from all all sporting organisations, even ones that have proper governance, as a result of this? Because there's absolutely no way, based on this, that there'll be any able to be this that will be cleared within the next year, and therefore are properly governed organisations going to be put at risk for large infrastructural developments as a result of this?
Let me answer the first question first. And you know, the large-scale infrastructure funds are due. The applications close tomorrow. That will be a 6-month process. It's going to be a long and very, very thorough process. Obviously, there's a lot of money involved in that. My hope certainly would be that the corporate government's reforms in the FAI will be adequate at that stage to enable us to look at it as we would have done any other group, any other body that's in good stead. If it's not, we'll certainly report back to you and let you know about it. But I think that is what we anticipate being the case. We also don't anticipate that all those applications will be considered on their merit, including the FAI. I don't think if they've got their corporate governance in order at that stage, they'll be fine. They'll be absolutely straight through.
The point I'm making is that, based on what we've heard, that's not going to be possible.
I just have to refer to everybody. Yep, no problem. If you want to respond, that's fine. But
yeah. The other thing is there's a great difference between applications and the drawdown, the grants, the payment of grants. They can make the applications, and no doubt they will have applications in tomorrow. It's when they draw down. That's when the crucial period will be. I wouldn't discourage them from making applications at all. It's when they draw the money down, when the drawdown comes, which will be even later again. So I anticipate that if they take the necessary urgent measures, that they will not be penalised in any way.
Sorry, thanks for your indulgence. Just
fairness.
Yeah.
So, Senator,
I'm going to let you.
I just want to be fair to everybody.
Well, I know, but I've
let me just be fair to you. I want to make sure everybody gets a chance. But
you're
8 minutes now into your 5 minutes. That's just the truth of it.
Yeah, I just want to clarify this.
I want to be fair to
because I don't want there to be any ambiguity about this. There will be applications tomorrow, right? Then there will be allocations, and then there will be drawdown. That is a 3-stage process. I don't anticipate that by the time it comes to drawdown that you'll have the sort of problems that you're anticipating at all. I think there would be a problem if a decision was made
if I can say
tomorrow.
This, if it's helpful,
sorry.
Senator, if you want to use you have 8 of your 10 minutes used, as opposed to 8 of the 5. So if you want to talk for another 2 minutes, that means you'll have done your 10 minutes.
Okay.
That allows your question.
No, it's just that the point I'm making is that could it happen then that some of these infrastructural projects for the FAI could be allocated funding, provided that their governance is in order? So, is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. They can be allocated it.
In advance of...
They could be allocated it, but they are not going to get any funding. They're not going to get any funding whatsoever if they're not in good standing. There's going to be no drawdown.
Okay, thank you.
But I just think on that point, I think there's a precedent in the Olympic Council. I think they got funding, notwithstanding the problems that there were, when they proved to the department that they had made certain changes, I think, in terms of leadership and other issues. So it's not a sacrosanct no. You know, it's a definite yes if you make the changes. I think that's important. That people needn't fear up and down the country. If the changes happen, you can change the way you do business, even though you want it in black and white, and the physical body changes in terms of the people. I just have one question that strikes me. Seeing a lot of these issues revolve around the existing body, which is going which is going to retire at a particular time. But how do you know that all the documents you will seek are secure? Or how do you invigilate that? I mean, there's lots of stuff now. You have nobody in place appointed as yet to do that. You know, it's just huge trust being placed by the system in an organisation which we have huge queries over. You have a chief executive who's to be appointed. Would that be by this board or the new board? And there's a drift in management or accountability. And how do you make sure, you know, it's not, hey guys, do you agree if we do this? But I think you need to be more determined and absolutely certain that everything is available.
They have an interim chief executive that is in place, and that's who we are dealing with at the moment. And and they have staff, and there's 200 staff in the FEI, so there is people to deal with. We have board members that we have met, as I said, twice last evening, and I know those board members, certainly some of those board members that I met last night, they want to do the right thing. They want to be transparent, and that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm being told. And as they said to the Minister, they're willing to step aside or step down when the time comes. And they're determined to bring around about this reform and take something to an AGM. So,
the point I'm making is a different point. It's a question of the security of all the data and information that has been managed by people other than the state or by Sports Ireland. Is how what further steps could you take? Like I don't know. Like usually you can often in a company, and I'm not a company person in terms of knowledge of company law, but often you can put in somebody to oversee or to ensure on your behalf that the process is transparent. I know you're getting reassurances, and I know that some people, quote unquote, want to do the right thing, but the evidence we have here was quite the opposite last week. So that's my point.
Chairman, well, it's a point we hadn't thought about, but I suppose because this is a due diligence exercise, largely around a number of issues around financial controls, corporate governance, responsibility, one could probably engage with, and we'll take this up with the FEI, about creating a data room for the repository of documentation that's necessary.
And a data controller and protocols and procedures.
This happens normally in due diligence under the Companies Act, that you create a repository of what they call a data room for the information.
Okay, so
and just one piece, part of Grant Thornson's work was to secure all the documentation, which is an important piece. So Grant Thornton were undertaking to do that piece of work as well.
FAI. I'm not doubting their professionalism. I'm just doubting the evidence. Go ahead,
I suppose, Mr. Tracy, you said the board want to be seen to be transparent, and they've said that to you in their meetings. But I would say that their actions would signal to the contrary. They have been totally evasive with this committee, with you as an organisation, and they are not helping themselves by any stretch of the imagination. That's just an opening remark. Minister Ross, you said that you wouldn't be opposed to a forensic investigation. Well, you are the Minister. Sports Ireland are reporting to you. If you feel a forensic investigation is warranted, surely you can request it. Straightforward, yes or no, do you believe a forensic investigation is warranted into the total affairs of the FAI? Yes or no?
That'll be a matter I'll leave to Sport Ireland. If they advise me it's necessary, I would totally approve of it. Of course I would. I have absolutely no objection whatsoever. I think the most thorough, necessary examination.
I asked for a yes or no. You
yes, also, I'm happy for that. I'm more than happy.
You also said you didn't know, in response to Deputy Rock, whether it was going to be, in your line here, yesterday's announcement that former CEO had voluntarily stepped aside pending an independent investigation. And when asked why it was independent, in inverted commas, do you feel that it is independent? You said, I don't know whether it is or not. Have you confidence that the investigation is going to be fully independent?
I don't know the answer to that question, because I don't know what the construction of that particular inquiry is. I don't know the terms.
But what are you going to do to ensure that the investigation is independent?
At this stage, that is a matter which I will leave to Sport Ireland, because Sport Ireland are communicating on my behalf with the FAI and are doing an extraordinarily effective job.
You said that you constantly made known that you were not happy with the board of the FAI vis-à-vis the lack of independence, vis-à-vis the limits, the term limits and the length of service certain board members were on the board, and you constantly made it known. How did you constantly make it known, considering that following the EGM in February of this year, your department and your Minister of State approved exemptions to the existing term limits for certain board members?
Let me expand on that for you. When
I'd ask you to be
when I became aware,
tight with your answer,
yeah,
please.
fine. When I became aware of the EGM that was going on and what they were doing to comply with the code to which they have agreed to comply, I asked my civil servants, I asked Ken Spratt, who'll probably elaborate on this, to get in touch with them and express my personal and as Minister my unease with what they were doing. Maybe you should.
But sorry,
answer that
with
question.
due respect,
Yeah.
Mr. Spratt, they needed your approval, is my understanding, in order to break the exemption.
They didn't need my approval at
Well,
all.
I read a press statement. The reason why the approval was given, was to ensure continuality, and you didn't wish to see a brain drain from the organisation.
Not the case.
We'll come back to that later on.
It was just not the case, Deputy.
But Minister of State made
let's
that
get
press
it right.
release. But we can come back later on. I have it.
You see, Deputy, can I just say this? It does not need my approval at all. What I can do is express my concern if they're not complying with what I would think they should comply with. They don't need my approval for that at all.
So
the leverage I have,
there was no requirement for approval for the exemption in term limits that was adopted in the EGM in February of this year.
Absolutely not at all, Deputy.
Okay. Can I move on to Sports Ireland? In relation to the suspension of funding, there was resistance when you were here almost a fortnight ago to making that decision. I think that's fair to say. There was a resistance from yourselves that you were going to go down to take this course of action.
Well, we were involved in the process, and all those issues are a matter for the board, and that was the first opportunity we had at the board, was to discuss it in April. So we made that decision very quickly.
Okay. But there was resistance, I would say. And
No,
in my understanding
there wasn't resistance, Deputy. Let's say.
Apologies, gentlemen. There's a vote in the Dáil, so the Shandon's in the Dáil, isn't it? So we'll have to adjourn. Do you want to finish asking your question? I don't know, how long is the notice up, do you know? Just as so if you just want to finish that, and we'll come back to you and we start your talk again.
This isn't the first time, of course, that funding was suspended to the FAI. It was suspended in November 2004. We had the Genesis report, which all of key recommendations were not implemented. Would you accept that there is, I suppose, a lack of respect from the FAI to Sports Ireland in terms of complying with your requirements of the FAI?
You'd have to ask the FEI that.
No, and asking for your opinion on it.
Well, my opinion is we've had good relationships with the FEI over the last number of years. We've continued to do our business. Our programmes are well supported by the FEI, and so it's been business as normal until this crisis hit.
Well, would you accept that business as normal wasn't good enough? And that
Robert, we'll let you straight in when we come back, but the meeting is suspended now until after the Dáil vote. So we'll adjourn until then, please. public session, and Deputy Troy has the floor, and you have 5 minutes left.
Can I ask Minister Ross, is he happy for the existing board to remain in situ, given that it is this board who has been in place to us and has oversaw the practices to lead us to where we are today, and who continue to be evasive and refuse to answer basic questions, even to who signed off on a press release saying that they were all in full knowledge of the 100,000 bridge and loan? Are you satisfied that the existing board will remain in place to July?
No, I'm not happy that they should stay where they are at the moment. But I am very happy with the fact that they have declared their intention to step down at the EGM, which is going to be called before July. I think that is.
We don't know the EGM is going to be called before July.
They've said in their letter here. They've said in their letter here. The board will be brought to the membership for their consideration at our annual general meeting in July, or at an extraordinary general meeting if the work of the group facilitates an earlier date. At that point, it says, when a new structure has been put in place,
but, sir,
it is intended. Just let me finish this.
No, I've read the statement.
The existing
Minister.
board
Sorry,
will.
Minister.
Deputy, I'm answering your question.
No,
with the statement.
Minister,
I've
hold
read
on.
the
Look, come here.
statement.
Yeah.
Deputy, sorry. I think you were asking the question, no issue. The Minister he just has another line to read in that.
Yeah.
And
No,
that's
Minister,
fine.
I've read the statement.
No,
we
let
have
him
a
answer.
short point.
No, I'm not going to cut your time. I just want him to get the
Thank you.
complete
At that-
answer in. We'll give you extra time for this.
It says at that point,
worry.
when a new structure has been put in place, it's the intention that the existing board will step down to allow for a new board to be constituted in the best interests of football. That is really a breakthrough, and I'm very, very pleased with that. My preference would be that they weren't there today, but there has to be someone to start the corporate governance reforms which we're talking about. And
But,
they have to be
Minister,
there.
they have been in situ. These are the people who haven't overseen adequate corporate governance for the last number of years. These are the people who have oversaw the procedures that has you here today, FAI here last week, and Sports Ireland here the week before. So have you confidence that they can oversee the reforms that's needed in the FAI, given the fact that they oversaw the problems that led us to where we are today?
Deputy, I made it quite clear that I would prefer that they weren't there today.
Okay. Can I ask Sports Ireland, there seems to be a resistance or reservations about conducting a full independent audit, and you seem to be relying on both Mazars and Grant Thornton. Given the fact that, Mr Mulvey, you said that you had a cursory look at the terms and conditions of Mazars, how can you be satisfied that the terms and conditions are going to adequately address the wide-ranging issues that pertain to the FAI?
Deputy Troy, first of all, I want to be clear here that Sport Ireland has no resistance to conducting a forensic audit. What we do have to clarify at the moment, and it is a moving game, so to speak, we have to be clear what the terms of reference of Mazars will be and what they're investigating and how they intend to conduct that investigation. My understanding is that because it involves the Companies Act and because it may involve an existing person who certain matters may arise in regard to them, that legal advice to the FAI is clouding some of these issues. It's not clear, so I have to be careful regarding that. And I have enough knowledge of employment law to know we need to be careful in regard to that. So I'm just saying that there's a few parallel processes. One is the Grant Thornton. We believe that exercise can be completed very quickly because it relates to internal oversight and the 100,000. The Mazars are going into more detailed issues, as we understand it, that have arisen recently in the media in regard to certain transactional arrangements plus third-party arrangements. So that will be going on. Our view largely was, Deputy, was that there was no point us duplicating what was being done. But what we will be doing is overseeing and conducting oversight. And if that's a forensic audit, it will be done. I mean, my concern at the moment, who's auditing the auditors?
Exactly, yeah.
You know?
Exactly, yeah.
But look, Deputy, can I give this committee a full reassurance, and the Minister has indicated that to us. He doesn't need to give us a direction in that. We will do that.
But we have a situation now where we have an improper financial transaction, not reported, non-adherence to basic level of corporate governance, substantial matters being considered by the Office of Director of Corporate Enforcement, continual refusal of the existing board to answer basic questions. The FAI auditors themselves have filed a notice that proper books of accounts were not being kept to the company registration officers. I just have to say, what will it take for Sports Ireland to actually say, you know what, an independent forensic examination is needed, because you are still only considering it and will not adjudicate it until such time as Mazars, you know the terms and conditions of Mazars. When will you know the terms and conditions of Mazars?
How long are Mazars there? They're there for weeks, I think, aren't they?
Well, Deputy, I've just given a firm commitment on behalf of Sport Ireland that we will conduct a forensic audit. We will have to engage.
When will that commence, though?
Well, it commences as soon as we're in a position to appoint auditors. Our Chief Executive has just indicated we're having difficulty appointing auditors who will undertake this work for us.
So we will have...
But we will undertake that under the normal procurement rules that we're required under Department of Finance and Public and Expenditure Reform regulations, as we do always in regard to this. What we don't want to do is have a situation where we're expending a considerable volume of money, duplicating work that's been done and paid for by the FAI or the Office of the Director of Corporate Enforcement. But Deputy and members of this committee, Chairman, I wish to assure that, and in front of the Minister, we don't need the Minister to tell us this. We will do this.
But just on that point there,
Sorry,
go back. Sorry, no, I just want to make this point. That when I asked you earlier, you were saying that Mazars were consulting with the Director of Corporate Enforcement into the work that they were doing. Surely the time is now for the Director of Corporate Enforcement to take over and act proactively and in situ in this situation. Sorry, it's Deputy Munster is nice. Sorry. Okay, right.
Chairman, I asked Mr Mulvey the last time he was here before the committee, was at any stage the board of Sports Ireland made aware of potential irregularities within the FAI? You said there wasn't. You were unaware. And that's despite the fact that there was a well-publicised High Court case, indeed with a member of your own board, where I understand resulted or came about because of concerns being raised with the FAI. Do you consider Sports Ireland have failed in their duty in terms of oversight of the FAI in the last number of years?
Chairman, do I have absolute privilege here?
You have, yeah.
I
Yes,
do?
You have, yeah.
That issue you refer to related to certain members of the Irish Sport Council engaging in corporate practices that were contrary to the Code of Governance of state bodies. And I, on behalf of the board, took action in regard to that.
But in relation to concerns in relation to the FAI irregularities,
it wasn't in regard to the FAI.
Do you have any regrets in terms of the oversight from Sports Ireland over the last number of years?
I don't, because I have no evidence of it, and I didn't have evidence of it. But what I had to do on behalf with the board's support was to stop certain members of the board meeting in concert outside the Board of Sport Ireland, deciding who would get grants and what grants they would get. Now, I don't want to go into that. I don't want to name the individuals.
I think that's exceptionally
But the Minister
clear, yeah.
supported me at that time on that matter.
Okay, well, I think I have to take that.
Kerry, Kerry wasn't on the list, Deputy Coppinger. My memory...
Okay, well, look,
I'm fed up with Kerry
think-
meeting
hold on.
Roscommon all the time in football and beating us.
Can I? Sorry, can I... And Louth would like to do well in football too. We can fix a few matches, like an All-Ireland or even a Meath Louth game. Deputy Munster.
Thanks, Cahir. Look, just in relation to the statement from the FAI board today about the board planning and stepping down, I'm just asking Sport Ireland, what, if anything, would preclude them from putting themselves forward for re-election at the following AGM? Are you going to make it a condition of planning that the funding would not be reinstated unless, you know, to preclude any former board members from putting themselves forward? Is that going to be a condition of the funding being reinstated?
No, it cannot be, Deputy. Regretfully, it cannot be. We don't have that authority. That is a function under the Companies Act, and the only people who are allowed to disbar directors is the Office of Corporate Enforcement.
Was it under the Companies Act that the OCI were their funding was withheld?
No.
Until such no. So
No,
is that
not,
option not open to you to withhold funding until such time as the new board is elected and it doesn't include any former members of the existing board?
No, Deputy, we can't put that precondition for the reasons I've explained to you.
So, yes, but you said the last was under the Companies Act. But how did that come about in relation to the OCI board being fully replaced?
The OCI, as I recall it at the time, internally were taking these actions. We then received certain instructions in that regard regarding the funding of the then OCI, for which we made, we actually funded the OCI, the then OCI, to a level and degree that was almost, apart from their own resources, 100% of their funding in terms of office staff, etc. So what I'm saying to the Deputy here, we do not have authority under the 2015 Sport Ireland Act to determine who should be elected or appointed directors or appointed representatives within NGBs.
Given the seriousness of this all of the issues that have arisen, do you feel that your powers need to be extended to include that you could have a precondition of funding reinstated, given the seriousness of this issue? Is it not now the time to have such powers? Because otherwise what we're looking at basically is that the FAI board step down and they can put themselves forward for re-election, so nothing changes. I mean, I was looking at their statement there, and they're literally in their statement saying they're going to oversee the investigation, that they're actually allowed to stay in situ while there's the restructuring of the board, and that they recommend that it be allowed to facilitate the management of these processes to the conclusion. I mean, that's ridiculous. They're running rings round you. That's hard to credit that this could be considered a step in the right direction. That's not the case. It's anything but the case. Are you allowing them to run rings round you?
Well, no, Deputy, I come back to the powers and authority of the Sport Ireland Act.
And I asked you a question about the extending of your powers so that you can be in some shape or form effective, because as it stands, it's not looking like you are.
Deputy, it is open to the legislature to amend our Act to give us greater authorities regarding the constraints on our funding.
Okay, thank you.
But I want to avoid just the regulatory authority side.
Would the Minister consider extending the powers so that the Sport Ireland have more powers behind them, if you like? So this doesn't end up just a complete and utter farce altogether? Given the seriousness of the issue,
the answer to that is yes, of course, I'll consider it.
Okay, that's good. Well, then, if we could get those in place as soon as possible, then at least it'll stop what is predictable is going to happen, or likely to happen.
I think what may help, Deputy, in regard to the question is, we will revisit the funding conditions and look at areas where they need to be strengthened. They're not in the Act, they're regulations we apply and we've referred to them. But certainly we have a job to do now in terms of what has emerged. Are they robust? and sufficient enough to ensure we don't have a repeat of this in the FAI or any other organisation.
Yeah.
Certainly we will take that on board.
Could I suggest, just as a committee member, that you look at those funding conditions and extending the powers so that we don't see what I suspect is a possibility come the next AGM of the FAI. Can I also just say, we're 3 weeks into the process, and it appears to me that the only investigations that are being carried out into the FAI are those by the FAI or commissioned by the FAI. And I'm just wondering, and I know other deputies have asked about why, given the seriousness of it again, why Sport Ireland didn't initiate their own investigation in relation to carrying out a forensic audit. Now, I know you had said that you had no resistance to a forensic audit, but what you had said earlier was it would be forensic in nature. Now, that's not the same as a forensic audit in any shape or form. You said it would be as extensive as you would like it to be or as you would want it to be. That's still not a forensic audit. I mean, we were critical of, you were saying about terms and conditions of Mazars, that as far as you know, that you're unsure of them, but you think that that would be similar to a forensic audit, but you're not sure of that. But we were critical of the FAI refusing to give answers by virtue of the fact that they were hiding behind the Mazars report and the Grant Thornton review also. But it appears to me that Sport Ireland have been sitting back, letting the FAI investigate themselves or bring in, commission others to investigate, and you've done nothing of that nature. I mean, you haven't actually said you go ahead with commissioning a forensic audit.
Can you
confirm if you would do that?
Can I maybe come in here? I think we're forgetting what the powers of Sport Ireland are, right? We were in here the last time and we went through a verbatim in terms of what our powers were, right?
Sorry, just to interrupt you, just on a point there. The Minister said earlier that he would actually be in favour of a forensic audit, and he said that that depends on Sport Ireland. So you do have the powers.
We don't have the powers under the current Act, right? Not under the current Act. And
well, we need clarity there. Because the Minister said he's in favour.
If I finish my answer, I'll actually clarify it for you.
This is very important questions and answers, so we'll keep. There won't be time penalty here. So if you answer,
if I answer that, please. Last night we agreed with the FAI that we would carry out an in-depth audit of the FAI, right? We are open for any suggestions with regards to the audit of the FAI, right? Forensic or whatever, right? We'll do it. There's not a question about it, right? If it's required, we'll do it. We know exactly what we need to do in this situation, but we need the FAI to approve that we were going to do this in-depth audit with them. Because we don't have the powers to do it. Simple as that.
Yeah, you were due to carry out an audit this year anyway, because the last full one was 2016. So can you confirm whether or not, either through the Minister or yourselves as Sport Ireland, that this one will be different? It won't be like the ordinary audit. This one will be a forensic audit, given all we've witnessed, all the remaining questions that are unanswered. Will you confirm here and now that this audit carried out by Sports Ireland will be a forensic audit?
Yes, Deputy. I said that earlier and I'm reiterating it will be because, and one of the other reasons is, we weren't aware last night that there was this report to the Company Registration Office. It was our legal advisors who advised us this morning. We only became, and I do, on this, in regard to this matter, we brought it to the attention of the Chairman as soon as we found out about it.
Okay.
That actually, to be honest with you, that event alone changes my mind as Chairman of Sport Ireland, and my view would be reporting that to the Board, and I thought the Chief Executive. I want no more surprises. I want no more drip feeds. I don't want to be reading what I need to know and should know and be granted the information as a statutory agency that gives 2.9 million to the FAI, even if it's only 5%. We have an obligation, and that will be done. No more drip feed, no more relying on third-party or second-party information. We need to satisfy ourselves and the Board of Sport Ireland that everything is appropriate and proper within the FAI, and in the time period, whatever it is, and I hope it's sooner rather than later, because I do not want to see deputy, and nobody here does. We want the development officers paid in August. We want the sports to continue, and 60% of our grant goes to paying development officers of that 2.9 million.
But that's why, sorry, that's why I stress the issue of, I think, everybody out there wants to see those at the top, the board, those at the helm held responsible, and not grassroots to suffer because of that. And that's why it's important that they are held to account, and that's why it's important that the powers are extended, so that they cannot, if they're stepping down, they cannot just put themselves forward at the next AGM and the following day then it's as we were, lads. So that's why you need to, bring in whatever powers or extend whatever remit you have to ensure that this is nailed in the head for once and for all. Can I ask you, are you confident that the FAI are not in breach of the Companies Act 2014 in respect of public funds? I know you can't answer in respect of private funds, but in respect of public funds, are you confident?
I can't give an absolute assurance on that, Deputy, until we conduct the audit at the moment in regard to the current expenditure. For previous years, yes, according to the auditor's report we have received.
But that's all the more important that you do carry out that forensic audit this year. And just, I'm going to pass the remainder of my time to my colleague, Jonathan O'Brien, but as John Delaney is not a member of the board anymore, will he also be resigning? Did the Minister get any clarification, or Sport Ireland, in your meeting yesterday? Is it, what's going to happen with John Delaney? He's stepping aside temporarily while the FAI carry out an internal investigation whilst leaving the door open for him. This again comes back to strengthening your powers and extending whatever powers that you have.
My understanding at the moment is, and Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong on this, from my experience in employment law, is there is the term that an individual is on gardening leave. I assume that is where Mr. Delaney is. I don't know, I'm not party to the arrangements, the deal that was made between the legal people representing both sides, and I'm always conscious of not interfering in third-party contract as a party on this, but I would understand from what I normally is that where there is a question raised regarding an individual's performance, they're put on gardening leave while that investigation takes place.
So what you're saying is that's an involuntary to be put.
I don't know, Chairman. No, what I understand, a legal agreement was arrived.
I'm just asking, yeah.
I'm not reading the parties.
But
the statement from the FEI said voluntary stepping aside.
Do you accept, or would you be of the belief that, given that the board actually allowed Mr. Delaney to voluntarily step aside, that also points to the fact that the board are totally dysfunctional and they cannot stay?
I think, Deputy, I'd have to understand, I can't give you a yes or no answer to that, because we would be involving ourselves in commentary that may eventually end up in a court of law, because an individual's contract and his relationship with his employer is the issue here, and we're not party to that. We don't pay any element of that. That is for them to decide.
Okay, just finally, just very briefly, will you give a commitment to the committee?
Sorry, I have to take Deputy Coppinger now. We'll be coming back to the second round. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So welcome back to the committee. The Players Association last week said something is rotten in the FAI. If something is rotten, it needs to be completely excised. I'm sure you'd agree.
Yeah.
So following on from that, I'd ask you two questions. You just answered Deputy Munster by saying that you can't make John Delaney, the Executive Vice President, step down. But there is a moral authority. So I'm going to ask you and I'm going to ask the Minister, are you going to ask the board of the FAI to abolish the role of Executive Vice President that it created? So just yourself first.
They're in a process at the moment, as I understand it. And I think if we did something like that, we would wind up in a court of law. I believe that.
This is a position that was created for one person with no other candidates.
I agree. And I think if we did that, we'd wind up in the High Court, I think, if we did that.
Okay. Minister, I'm going to ask you the same. Will you ask the FAI board whenever you meet them, you haven't had a chance to meet them since the statement, to relinquish that position of Executive Vice President that it created?
I would echo exactly what John Tracy said. I don't want to end up in the High Court. I don't want to say anything here which would prejudice what's going on. So I'm not going to answer that question, the yes or no.
How would asking them to relinquish a position that they never should have created land you, the Minister, in the High Court? You're the Minister for Sport.
That doesn't mean that I'm immune from being called to the High Court, Deputy.
So the second question relates then to the board. Everybody seems extremely confident, based on the latest epistle from the FAI board, that they will step down. But given that they've concealed information from Sport Ireland in terms of their financial stability in 2017, they've concealed information from the public and from all of us. Do you not think that the board is part of the problem, not the solution? And therefore, why is the board being left in charge of cleaning up the FAI? I'll just ask Sport Ireland first.
2 points on that, and I'll just say is this. We were extremely disappointed when we read that statement this morning, because they had an opportunity to tell us last night and they didn't tell us. Right? That was really disappointing in terms of the actions that we've taken in recent days to put pieces in place to get them back on an even keel and get the waters to calm. That's one piece. Really disappointing in that. And that trust piece is weakened because of that.
Now, you didn't have a chance, but will you ask them the next time to just
I will.
Step down immediately?
Yes, I will. Can I just go on and just say, look, we're going through a process with the FEI at the moment, right? If we need a board to deal with, we can't deal in a vacuum, and that's the critical issue for us at this moment in time. If everyone steps down, there's a vacuum. Then there's how long does it take to put new board members in place? There'll be a vacuum. And then we're talking about real delays. So that's one issue. And the second issue, and this really is an important issue that we all need to bear in mind, is that all these sporting organisations wouldn't be long telling you they're autonomous organisations, right? They wouldn't be long telling you. And they're all accountable to international bodies. And the international bodies either wouldn't be long in telling you. And there's been plenty of experience of that down through the years, of countries and governments and telling national bodies. So there's all that type of things that need to be bear in mind when you're talking about these issues. Yeah.
I know, but would you agree it's quite a weak answer to say, oh, we'll take a bit of time to set up a new board, therefore we leave the rotten board in place that has led to all the problems in the first place?
Well,
Minister, would you like to answer that? Are you going to ask them to step down straight away?
I'm very glad that you asked the question. You said, do you not believe the board is part of the problem? Yeah, absolutely, yes. The board is part of the problem. It is imperative that they step down. And indeed, what we've got here today.
Now we're in July.
Now we've got a commitment that they will step down, which they will be held to. What we have
from the FAI doesn't mean an awful lot. We found that out.
Please, Deputy. What we have is a commitment. If you want them to step down today, which I would like, and indeed it was in my initial statement before I got this today, I would like them to step down. That is my desire that they step down. But wait a minute. As John Tracy said, if they step down today and we had to put a new board in place, it would take some time. There'd be a vacuum, and it would delay the implementation of the corporate governance reforms. What I want to see is them go, step down, as they say, and I believe they will step down because of what the letter they sent me today, and I want it to happen as quickly as possible before the AGM, not afterwards.
I've got another few questions. I mean, I just would have thought an interim board is better than the current board, you know. But just want to ask Sport Ireland, 2 weeks ago at this committee, you said you were reluctant to impose the ultimate sanction that you had. A week later, obviously, you did impose it. Do you think you were far too slow and cautious? And should this not have been done years ago, given that all of us know, I mean, the junior minister himself says in the statement, there's been long-running friction in the FAI.
We had to go through a process, and the board is the one that makes that decision. If we decide we needed very good reasons to suspend funding, the FAI admitted that they didn't keep with the terms and conditions of funding. We knew we couldn't be challenged then when they admitted it. Yeah,
that's great. Right. So the junior minister today, you say there's long been friction in the FAI. You're right. The dogs in the street have seen the carry-on in the FAI.
And
I'm not finished the question. Just like to finish the question first. So you then say, because the reason that we were told this sanction couldn't be imposed was that the grassroots out there was going to suffer. Kids wouldn't be able to play football any longer. And yet today you come in here and you tell us there's no issue that we would penalise local soccer clubs for issues in their national association. Now, if that is the case, why did it take years for the political, I'm not blaming Sport Ireland, for the ministers to do something about what's going on?
So, I think it's very important to point out here, and to reiterate here again, our primary purpose here is to ensure that people who want to play soccer and people who want to be active in sport
why did it take so long to
are
act?
Active. And I think what you're advocating is that you hurt the people most that need our support most.
You said you
Our position here is that
hang on, Minister. You say in your own statement that people won't be hurt by these actions. That's what I'm saying.
Sorry, Minister, Deputy Coppinger. I think we're doing exceptionally well here today. I think if you
but I quoted
just listen for a
Chair,
minute.
I quoted a quote at him, and now he's answering something else.
There's nobody. And no deputy is being, or senator is precluded from asking questions, but witnesses must be given the opportunity to answer them. And there'll be no. If he goes on longer than you expect,
can I just explain what I'm asking?
Yeah, but hold on a second. Look, I want to work this out. He's answering. Let him answer, and then you can ask further questions, and there'll be no time penalty for you in this answer now.
So, thank you, Chairman. Deputy, as you know, these recent revelations have come to light. This entire process that has started recently is something that concerns us all. And as a result of that, obviously it's important that we would use whatever leverage we have to ensure a speedy resolution to the issues that we have. One of those areas that we have in terms of leverage is the Sports Capital Programme. I think it's critically important, however, that we would ensure that the people who are affected by our actions are the people that we need to affect, not the people who would ultimately become victims, the people on the ground, the grassroots members who want to play and participate in sport, the volunteers who facilitate that. That's why we need to be very targeted in what we do. And as we know, this is something that has come to light recently. The specifics here that we're talking about have come to light recently, and I think we've acted accordingly.
Okay. So you say those of us elected at All Ireland have a responsibility to the people of Ireland to ensure public funds are used wisely, right? So were public funds used wisely at the FAI over the years, given what we read, which we haven't heard denied by the board, regarding expenses, travel and the salary of the ex-CEO?
Yeah, I know that some people want to be judge, jury and executioner, but there's a process here in place, and we need to allow that process to continue to find out when we have all the facts to establish an answer to that question. We are concerned. That's why we're all here. And we want to get the answers to the questions that need to be answered. And I'm not happy that many of the questions that all of us have and soccer supporters around the country haven't been answered today, but that's what we're trying to establish.
Okay. Well, it is established that the ex-CEO had a salary at one point of over 400,000. It's been reduced down dramatically and terribly to 330.
We know that there's an awful lot of information out there in the public domain.
So the note from
hopefully more information that we will get that we don't have yet.
The note from the auditors to Sport Ireland saying that they're FAI is in breach of one or more of the sections of the Companies Act, which is a criminal offence, right, which you only found out today. So I would again ask you if such a people are fitting to be overseeing a root and branch review and overhaul of the FAI.
We need to be careful. I am sorry I'm saying that now, but we do need to be careful, because if we say things like that, we'll all wind up in the wrong place in the High Courts. So we have people that we're dealing with at the moment that are in position within the FAI. They're the only people that we can deal with at the moment, right? And that's what we're doing. So that's our like we don't elect these people. We don't elect these people.
Okay.
In fairness to the question, I think it is valid, because you're asking about the board that this is referring to, but you're not implying anything about the people.
No, I'm saying the board that's been in place when this has been
Chairman,
discovered.
Yeah,
Deputy Coppinger, the FAI have a council of 60 people who have the real, as I understand, legislative and governing authority within that. They elect the management board and officers. So it is up to them to act if they so wish to act. And I think, as John has said earlier, Deputy Coppinger, we have to deal with the people we have at the moment. And if the view is that they have questions to answer, and obviously they do, we can only deal with them and hopefully work with them to achieve the solution as necessary. But we have indicated already that we are being disappointed to date with the performance there. Now, certain assurances have been given this morning, certain assurances have been given to us last night, and I can assure you, Deputy, that, and Chairman, members of the committee, I've been in the business, industrial relations and dispute negotiation nationally and internationally for a long time, and I don't think there's a stupid written on my forehead at any stage. If I find out this committee is not dealing with us in an upright and forward and transparent manner, I'll have a number of things to say and bring back to the chairman of this committee and to the minister as to whether we're making any progress in regard to
so
this.
just finally, with Sport Ireland, right, we've had issues re the FAI, re boxing, and the Olympic Council of Ireland, and earlier somebody asked, and you said that there were similarities with the Olympic Council of Ireland, with strong personalities at the helm of these organisations. Would you also agree that other features seem to be, personal aggrandisement, nest feathering by strong personalities at the helm of these organisations?
Those characteristics would seem to make sense.
And can I add
hubris around?
Well, given that, can you imagine how frustrating it is for members of the public to hear today that the best that can be done by this committee and this minister is that one of the people's on gardening leave and that's okay and we can't do anything about it? Can you imagine how frustrating that is?
Yeah, we can imagine that. Absolutely.
Can I ask you about the last questions on the new board? I appreciate that you're trying to, you came along with and I know nothing about the person and there's no reflection on them, but would you not agree that it's now time for a whole complete change in how the boards of sporting organisations are run? So, for example, should there not be representatives on the board of the players, of the supporters, of the general public who, go out on a Saturday, drive their children, etc., on these boards as well?
Okay. I would imagine, and I'd be clear that the governance review that has been set up, that's exactly what they would be looking at representative of the new FEI going forward. It's been set up. That's exactly what they would be looking at representation, looking at who will be the appropriate people. And I think very importantly as well, and we have this in a lot of sports, the appropriate skills. Because boards they're not tracksuits. They're people that know what good corporate governance is. And they don't. And I think what the failings of some of the sporting organisations is sometimes they come up through the ranks and come up through branches, and they're not. And we find it when they come into Sport Ireland for training, they don't have the appropriate skills. So you're starting all over again with new board members. But that's the nature of sport, and a lot of them are representative organisations from different branches, I think, and they are the kind of limitations of these sporting organisations.
Sorry, some minister wants to come in, yeah. And then can I just say, just before you answer, I just think that a couple of members have been on to me that perhaps we should have a break for about 15-20 minutes after this, so that we can resume, because witnesses are, not that they've asked for it, but are entitled to a break as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah.
I commend you for that. It's saying that supporters and fans and others should be, who really are, coaches, volunteers, leagues, players, should have places on the board. I think that is absolutely essential. One of the glaring gaps that exist in what's happening in the FAI is there appears to be a really well-heeled elite at the top and a very powerful elite at the top. But football is about the people you've mentioned. Football is about the supporters. Football is about the players. Football is all about those people. And they should have, and I said it, you probably heard it in my opening statement, I said absolutely categorically that they should have not voices on committees, not voices at a low level. They should have, in my view, they should definitely have places on the board of the body that runs football. Let's not be equivocal about it. You're right.
So you're going to change the regulations?
Well, I don't change it, but I'm going to make that suggestion and do everything I can to see that that happens.
Can I just say before we break, I think one issue is just arising here, and maybe we may not be able to get the answer today, but it seems to me the Light, as I understand it, are obliged to tell the FAI when they assume there was issues in relation to their keeping of accounts, and they've up to 7 days after that to tell the Director of Corporate Enforcement. What we need to know, and you need to know, is when Daly told the FAI, because when did they form that opinion? Because it could happen, I'm not saying it has happened, that the meetings that we had, that they already knew that this was going on, and why they didn't tell you last night, or just doesn't make sense at all. So I'll adjourn now till 4:25. Is that okay for break for everybody? The meeting is now suspended. Shadow Pádraig Ó Céidigh is la canta spéir.
Tá cadach an láir tá spéir go maithagad. Nó féidir na ceisní chuir a scoilge a chaithir lo. No, ní féidir. Quickly, I'll just run into my time. I want to focus more on the future, a little bit on the past, but primarily on the future. And my questions are primarily to Sports Ireland, to John and Kieran, and either of you can answer these. Are you satisfied that no other similar situations have occurred in any way similar to the FAI or the Olympic Council of Ireland in the past? They were here before us about 18 months ago or more. Are you satisfied that this is not going to occur again?
An issue like this in terms of a corporate governance issue, we hope not. We hope not. What I always say is this: we're dealing with a sector that we have to obviously do as best we can in terms of corporate governance. But you never know what's around the corner. In any given time, we could be dealing with 3 or 4 issues with the governing bodies, right? And at times, these normally don't hit the media, and we deal with them quietly in the background. But I would never say never in any of these issues.
You're satisfied with what's happening with currently situation, the way you're carrying out your audits and so on, that we're not going to have any other issue like this looking back?
We're
In other words, I'm asking you, are you in a position to stand over the audits you do on, and have done on corporate governance?
The audits we do on behalf of government, we can stand over.
You can stand over, yeah, because you actually mentioned that in the opening statement you made on the 3rd of April.
Yeah, we can stand over all those audits. Yeah.
Okay.
We're happy with those.
All right. In relation to not just the FAI, but other organisations that you funded?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's important, quite frankly, because that helps us with a level playing field on this. What do you think, just in maybe 3 or 4 or 5 key areas, what have Sports Ireland learned from this experience?
I suppose it is about the learnings really are for every sporting organisation and ourselves, in that what you have is you have to have robust corporate governance, right? And you have to have a balance of power. And that's the key piece here. A balance of power where the board directs and controls the organisation and the chief executive implements. It was very clear that that balance was wrong within the FAI and was wrong within the OCI. And that's a critical piece. And if that balance is wrong, you don't have the accountability, and that's a critical piece.
I accept that. And am I right to say that you only discovered this in relation to the FAI recently and in relation to the OCI after the ticketing scandal?
Well,
in other words, the audits did not show these?
The audits didn't show those particular issues.
So do you not think that the audit process and procedures should be changed?
Well, what we did with the FEI was follow the money, right? Which is follow our money, which is 5% of the funding or 10% of the funding, right? That's the only piece that we can do currently, right? So with all the other sporting organisations, we say save the 3 main field sports, is we can do an in-depth audit because we provide over 60%, 50% of the funding, right? But in these sports, our percentage of funding is a lot less.
Maybe I'm interpreting this thing.
Senator, if I may just add, regarding the learnings of it, apart from ourselves and what we may have to do, and I was responding to Deputy Munster earlier about strengthening our conditionality on grants and how they would be done. I've been involved in public service organisations for a long time, and I was General Secretary of Trade Unions in Ireland, but I have always had a problem about oversight of credit cards, oversight of discretionary expenditure. And I've always insisted, where I am, that they're limited and there's oversight to them.
Absolutely.
I don't use a credit card myself in any of the organisations in, because I think, unfortunately, they get muddled sometimes if you're not doing it. The second thing I think will be learning for us, I think this will strengthen what we've been trying to do on the journey around corporate governance. I think a lot of sporting bodies, in the light of what has happened here over the last number of weeks, will be, and I hope they will be, looking at their own organisation and saying, do we have appropriate oversight over finances? Are we getting sufficient reporting from our executives and full-time body? In Sport Ireland, every financial decision we make regarding funding, auditors, contracts, or whatever, are approved specifically by the board on substantive documentation. It's one thing I insist on. There's a separate vote on expenditures in Sport Ireland. And I think that will help us in the context of when we may have to say to some sporting organisations, look, we're not happy, or matters have come to our attention. The other issue from our point of view in terms of corporate governance is trying to ensure that this balance that's necessary between policy and oversight by the board and the functionality of chief executives or officers is important. I work very well, our own chief executive. We have an understanding and we go through things elaborately, and he informs me of things. I'm happy with that. There are sometimes a healthy or an unhealthy tension within organisations.
I know, I'm sorry, Kieran, and with respect, I don't want to... I believe there's a lot of learnings that Sports Ireland can take from this in order to strengthen and have your role as more relevant, or as relevant as it should be, quite frankly. You've got a number of terms and conditions of grant approval. Section 4.3 talks about material deterioration. You can appoint external auditors, appointed by Sports Ireland if you wish. It's a different section. Also, you can monitor trends and issues development. You've got compliance requirements, and there's a full section or booklet on code of governance in relation to it. So I believe you've got a fair amount from an operational perspective there. I'm almost finished, Chair. In relation to FAI, and Chair Kieran, I couldn't agree with you more. The FAI is a separate legal entity in their own right to Sports Ireland. And they're certainly, as we know, not answerable to us as an Oireachtas committee, and apparently don't seem to be answerable to some others as well. I'm not talking about Sports Ireland by a long shot. I do have a big concern, and the Minister mentioned it there earlier in his deliberation, in relation to a potential vacuum that will be created. And that's not good for grassroots, it's not good for the FAI, and all of us around the table here, all of us, want a very healthy, vibrant FAI and soccer organisation in this country. The process and the transition, I'm asking you, what kind of a process or transition would you see to ensure that there is continuity on the right track?
Yeah. Well, we have the corporate governance work that will be done over the next 6 months. It's been led by someone that knows corporate governance, lives it every day of the week in terms of, and is appointed by ourselves, right? They'll agree to terms of reference. They will be looking at what's happened in the past and what systems they need to put in place within the FEI for the future, right? And that piece is critical in terms of going forward. So the building blocks will be put in place. When there's a new board of the FEI put in place, we will ensure that they have the opportunity to ensure they avail of our training within Sport Ireland. And it would be one of the things that we would be asking the board to do is go through, yeah, make it a condition, go through all that training so that they know what their responsibilities are as board members.
Could you consider requesting them to get an independent certificate of corporate compliance, as you do from an audit cert, for example? It's something else that could be done. Yeah. Well, but that's totally up to you. I remember asking you the question 2 weeks ago, were there any red flags in the past, and you said none in relation to the FAI. And I went on Google, purely Google, and I came across an article by Paul Melia, I think he worked for the Independent at the time, in August 2013, saying a major split has emerged in the Irish Sports Council and a row centred upon the FAI. Can you elaborate on that? I don't want to read through it, but apparently it's about 3 board members of the FAI, and they're raising concerns about correspondence shows a growing frustration among 3 board members in relation to the information being provided to the board by the FAI. That came up at board meetings, either on...
No, that referred to certain circumstance in 2011, which I replied to Deputy Troy's question on. It wasn't about the...
Wasn't about the FAI?
Not exclusively about the FAI.
So this article isn't fully accurate?
Well, I would say it isn't fully accurate. There were other issues, but I wouldn't like to suggest it's inaccurate either.
Kieran, give me more.
Well, Senator, I don't want to be telling the backroom people here about that, their colleagues. No, I really don't want to go into it because...
Maybe you cannot for legal purposes, I don't know.
There was a confidentiality agreement signed with members of the board. And I don't wish to go into that because there are individuals who
fair
are still
enough. That's okay.
employed in the sports sector and prominent in public life. And I really don't.
Yeah, but there have been.
Resolve.
I accept that. But do you accept that there have been issues in the past between the FAI and the Irish Sports Council?
It was not so much between the FAI. It was securing understandings from the FAI around that the funding we gave them was secure from any other credit demand that might be made on the FAI at that stage, and that our funds were secure. And we got legal advice at the time by the Chief Executive and reported it to the board.
Because there's just another, again, this is purely Google. There's also another article by Emmett Malone, Saturday 24th of August 2013. The FAI has written to the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport, Leo Varadkar, asking him to initiate an investigation into the actions of its former executives in an attempt to have the Irish Sports Council conduct such an inquiry.
Yes, that related to the same incident.
It's the same incident.
It is, yeah.
And can you give us an outline of what happened without being, I don't want to put you on the spot from a legal point of view, but was that satisfactorily resolved?
It was,
and it has moved on, it's still not outstanding?
No, it's not outstanding. It was completed at the time, and the individuals involved in Sport Ireland came to an amicable conclusion on that. And we all moved on.
Okay, Tom Huas. Okay, Carculor.
Thank you. Dr. O'Keefe.
Again today, for the Minister's board, actually, in 2016, the previous Minister for Sport, Minister Pádraig Ó Céidigh, initiated the requirement for government's code, and that's in regards to government's code for community voluntary charitable organisations. And obviously, government bodies who receive funding from Sport Ireland to be compliant, and any organisation that was over 11 employees had to be complied by the 1st of January 2019. Have the FAI been signed up to that?
FAI currently, I'll tell you, Deputy, as of the end of March, 24 Sport Ireland supported bodies have fully adopted the code. 20 of those are NGBs, 3 are local sports partnerships, and 1 other. 56 Sport Ireland supported bodies, that's 42 national governing bodies, 6 LSPs and 8 others are on the way to adopting the code, and the FAI is currently one of those NGBs that are on the way to adopting the code.
You say on the way, is there much outstanding information? Or?
Well, the understanding is, and Sport Ireland could inform you further, that there is a governance committee that are tasked with overseeing that and with adopting the code.
Right. I suppose, to Mr. Tracy, Mr. Mulvey, you mentioned earlier that you did speak to the FAI in regards to Mazar ongoing audit. Last week, during Mr. Donald Conway's deliberations, he introduced a statement that was produced on the behest of Grant Thornton, explaining the situation of the financial transaction. Did you discuss that any further in regards to the Grant Thornton document?
We've seen the Grant Thornton document, and we now understand what the Grant Thornton review were doing, was looking at the financial procedures and helping the executive within the FEI ensure there was processes in place, and any issue that they had around the 100k was passed on to Mazars for their full investigation. That's my understanding.
Right.
Just interrupt the meeting. No, you could go back in a second. I've been informed that Minister Griffin has to go to the Dáil at 5 p.m. Minister Ross to the Senate at 4:55. Now, in view of the importance of the issues here, I would ask that they might arrange with other colleagues, ministerial colleagues, that they would take your business and we continue here, because I honestly can't think of anything more important than you answering the questions that you've answered so far and the ones that are going to come.
Chairman, it's the noise regulation bill.
Well,
yes.
And there
is nobody else can take it because Minister Griffin is my junior. And
the point is, if there's a speech, somebody else can read it. I'm not being.
It's not. It's
I'm just being factual.
I can't.
There's nothing more important than this. Yeah. Pardon? There's no rush.
It's report stage. It's report stage and committee stage.
But both houses could agree, in view of the importance of this, to either if his ministerial colleague isn't available, could adjourn it till later this evening. I'm expressing that as my view. I say it's the view of the committee.
I can go on for a while because the Senate's anyway just voting. I can go on till that's over, but then I'm on alert immediately after.
I think I'm on next, and I've only got one quick question, so you can get it.
Okay. Yeah. Right, Kevin, yeah.
Right, Chair, just clear the issues. 2 weeks ago, Sport Ireland, when we were in here, were happy enough with the delivery of the funding, state funding given to the FAI for distribution down to the relevant officers and so forth. Are you still happy that the money was given to the appropriate people?
Yes, Deputy, we are. We're as certain as we can be around that. But obviously, the 2019 funding will now come under the new audit we're undertaking that I gave a commitment to earlier. But yes, that money goes exclusively to development of sport, young persons, young people's sport, and to the payment. As I said earlier, a sizable chunk of that 2.9 goes to the payment of development officers. We think we get great value for that. The taxpayer gets value, and in fairness, the FAI put a considerable, about another 13 million into that programme.
Right. Okay, every 3 years you actually do the audits of the sports organisations who are applying for funding. And 2016, he did an audit for the FAI, and obviously in the leagues during the weekend, there was mention made of an extraordinary item of €60,000 being spent out of the FAI account. Would your auditors have seen that? Would they be made aware of that?
We wouldn't have been aware of that. The item you referred to, I think, appeared in the Sunday Times. We wouldn't be auditing the FAI's other funding. The funding they receive from UEFA, from match receipts, or from other government departments, local authorities, or whatever. Ours is just on that. So my understanding at the moment is that came out from, for want of the sake, one of the other 24 accounts they have.
Right. Well, that brings me back to the previous question to the Minister. Governance code, like, you know, obviously the governance code, I know it's not signed up yet, but obviously it was in motion. Like, would you not be looking at it on that basis, like, you know, the accountability and the whole operation of the organisation, like, would you not be?
Yeah, well, on the governance code, Deputy, that the governance code, as has been described earlier, it sounds a bit religious, but they're on a journey. Yes. Because of the statutory requirements that 2019 is a learning period and an information period. 2020, this is under the code. 2020 will be when it's put into effect, and 2021 will be the reporting period. So all charitable, voluntary sport organisations are moving from what was originally the DOCAS code to the new statutory code. So they've been given a time to migrate into the statutory requirements for reporting, adherence and supervision.
To clarify your communication with your legal advisors, Philip Lee and etc., in regards there could be a breach, a complaint made by the auditors. And 2 weeks ago, you know, I did ask you, you know, that when he looked at the accounts, that the accounts, for the want of a better word, they were qualified. The auditors did raise an issue when I asked you the question 2 weeks ago. Is this an issue? The auditors now, have you asked can you find out from the CRO, the company's registration office, what the complaints are? If you're aware of the complaint, what exactly are the issues the complaints are about? Like, what items?
My understanding, I'm not knowledgeable on this, but I think the company registrations office will put those up for public information on their own website within the next day or two. But we're going to have to find out in the meantime who made the requirement. We understand it may have been the FAI's auditors, and that, sorry?
It was
their auditors, yeah. We didn't know about that until this morning.
Yeah. Which is a disgrace, because you should have been told. We should have been told. It's a disgrace the way you were treated by them. Absolutely contemptuous. Yeah.
My concern, back to my ministers, you mentioned the suspension of funding, and I accept that wholeheartedly. But I'm concerned about the issue of going down as low as the sports capitation grants. Like, you know, I think you have to politicise you know, I see us, there's innocent clubs down the country, and Minister, you might get a hit, you know, this Minister Ross, in regards hit and roll Ireland, you know, and many of the clubs who apply for these sports capitation grants, you know, would not be au fait with what's going on up in Dublin, like, you know, and, you know, now that they've been seen as being guilty by association of silence, I'm concerned, you know, that the worry, the fear now is being put into clubs around the country, small soccer clubs, who doing the best to stand on their own, and now that they've been subjected to this punishment, seemingly.
Yeah, that's why I emphasised earlier specifically that it is our intention not to punish individual soccer clubs. On the contrary, our intention is to ensure that soccer clubs get the support they need to develop their facilities and develop in every other way as well. But I specifically emphasised earlier that our aim is not to punish individual local soccer clubs. We have at present the Sports Capital Programme 2018, which is being administered. The equipment-only element of that programme will hopefully be completed and ready for allocation in a few weeks' time. 635 applications under that section, and then by the autumn we hope to have the remaining applications under the scheme. There were 2,337 in total all over the country, so we have quite a large number to process, but we hope to have those available in the autumn time. What we did say was that under the Sports Capital Programme, the association itself can apply directly, and under the Large Scale Sporting Infrastructure Fund, the association itself can apply directly. And whereas we're not proposing that we would prevent allocations being made, what we did say is that we would prevent payments being made in the event of not seeing the type of progress that we want to see in relation to governance and all of the other issues that have come to light recently. So I specifically wanted to go out very loud and clear from this committee. We do not want to see people at grassroots, the front line, the volunteers, the participants affected under the Sports Capital Programme over this issue. On the contrary, we want to continue to support those people.
And Minister, just to clarify, so in regards to large-scale sports infrastructure grants, you know, you have a pot of 100 million. I take it that you've accepted all applications, irrespective of controversies going on. No matter
tomorrow is the close of applications.
But you would accept all applications, irrespective of the controversy that's going on. You know, I'm referring in my own backyard in Glenmire, the Youth Academy proposals, like, you know, you'll accept that.
Yeah, just capital, in regard to the capital, sports capital, the smaller, the clubs apply in their own right. They don't apply corporately.
Yes,
it's just the GA club, the cricket club, athletics club, swimming. It's not the FAI. They apply in their own right and are required to meet strict criteria about funding, lease, land holding, security, that there is no lien on any land, club or building. You know, it's pretty rigorous, but it's in their own right.
In relation to the Large Scale Sporting Infrastructure Fund, the assessment phase will take at least 6 months.
Yes.
After that, allocations we hope will be made. And there's generally, like, the average time for drawdown under the regular Sports Capital Programme is 2 years. So, you know, we could be talking quite a lengthy amount of time before actual payments come into question.
Time, Minister, because I have much time. The important answer is that the application will be accepted anyway, to be accepted. Okay, yes. Right. Finally, much is made about the age of the board, and I suppose the question I put to Mr. Tracy and Mr. Mulvey, like, you know, do you not see yourselves in situ in a long period as well, like, you know, or be under a previous structure, like, you know, that you're there yourselves with 10, 12, 15 years, like, you know, and I have no problems with that, like, you know, and I'm delighted to see you're doing your job, like, you know.
Well, Chairman, I'm a very youthful 67, you know. I just got the free travel pass, so no, I'm chairman. I was chairman of the Irish Sports Council, I think, for 3-4 years. Then it was abolished, and then, as was the National Sports Campus, then the current government nominated for reappointment under the new body, and this committee approved my appointment. I stepped down, as does John, in 2020 from both our respective positions.
Okay, now the time is up. I tell you what the problem we have here is I accept the ministers have other appointments, but if the members would like to ask them a question before they go, if that's helpful to the ministers. Look, I think it's terrible. It's unfortunate that they're going. Yeah, just hold on a second. I want to get this right. There's no problem. Sorry, I just have a new note here. Sorry, have I? Excuse me, sorry. Okay, so I appreciate the Minister is trying to get somebody to help in his work. So, right, I'm in your hands now. There's the order to come is Senator Feighan, Senator Daly, Deputy O'Brien, but I am conscious that if the ministers leave before they get to their questions...
But if it's helpful,
Yes,
I just have one quick question as part of my 10 minutes.
No problem, and that will mean the Minister can go earlier.
And the Minister can tell me if it's been asked before.
No problem, of course.
You've said it's now opportune to convene a stakeholders forum to allow representatives from international teams. How will that forum work? If it's been asked, if it's been answered already, how do you propose that forum to work?
I'll tell you the answer to that. It is an aspiration at the moment, but what will happen will be we are hoping that Sport Ireland and the committee that has been set up on corporate governance will get together, and Sport Ireland is going to have a large input into that, and set up a completely new system of electing the board. There are obvious defects at the moment in how the board is elected, the board of the FAI. And I hope that they will be able to, and I'm sure they will be able to set up a new system whereby the voices of supporters, fans, players, and various other elements in sport are represented and directly represented on the board of the FAI. We don't know exactly how to work at the moment, but we're determined that those voices should be heard. It's absolutely vital that the volunteers and those who benefit so much and have such a large stake in soccer should be represented on that board. They haven't been properly represented before, and we're determined that should happen.
Thank you.
Senator O'Mahony, then.
Sorry, just 30 seconds. In relation to what you said in your statement, Minister, about that an EGM should be called before the July date to facilitate the board to be restored or step down, this board that's there now to step down and a new board to be elected. Could I think they said in the FAI said in its statement to you that it may not happen until July, but it's within the FAI's own rules that members can call an EGM if they wish to. So here we have an example again. If they want, even at this late stage, to change direction and be proactive rather than reactive, they have the facility in the next couple of weeks to call an EGM within their own rules. And I would ask you to call on them to do that and get these processes, because otherwise it comes back to what I said at the beginning of the meeting. There's no way that this is going to be cleared up in time for any grants to be restored in the next year. That's my view, and I would ask you to
Could I just comment on that and respond and say, I'd welcome the fact if the members call an extraordinary general meeting to achieve this, I'd welcome it.
But I mean,
I can't make them do it.
Are we not all agreed that that should happen?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Can I just say there are a number of members offering, and the order, as I said earlier, is Senator Daly would be next. But in view of the fact that the ministers are going, I was trying to make sure people could get their questions in and then take them out if he wants to do that, or you can ask your question to the minister now. And then I'll come back to it. Whatever you want.
I was only asked for 1 minute of my 10 minutes.
No, I agree. No, I understand that.
Okay.
No. Oh, no, I understand that.
Okay.
It's just that I'm conscious of, I want the ministers, I understand their problem as well. So if you just ask your question of the minister, then Deputy Munster wants to ask a question of the minister.
My colleague is before me too.
No, but you see, yeah, look, I just want to make sure the minister hears the answer. So I'll take
my question to the minister short, and then I'll direct the rest of them straight away to the boys. The question basically is, we've had the Olympic Council scandal, we've had the boxing scandal, we've had now we have soccer. Previously we had entirely different scandal in relation to Swim Ireland. When, Minister, are you, like Sport Ireland have asked for more power, when are you going to give it, when are you going to bring in the legislation to stop this happening? All we're doing is reacting to scandal after scandal, and instead of us waiting, and I think Kieran Mulvey made the point very well, he said, who's auditing the auditors, right? We have a report here from Jonathan Hall Associates which said everything's hunky-dory, or they just needed another VP and it'll be grand. We have, more extraordinarily, last week, what we were told by the President of the Football Association was from Grant Thornton that they saw this one-page document that said, while this €100,000 is a bit odd, it's grand. That's what Grant Thornton were alleged, and that's a problem, because now Grant Thornton are the ones that are saying are now going to do the review. And yet, last week, they didn't say, actually, this should be going to the company's registration office. They didn't raise any possible problem at all. And yet, they were being asked to do the review. They are now still being asked to do the review. Now, bear in mind, that, like, and these are direct questions in relation to, yesterday, did the Football Association of Ireland in any way, shape or form say, actually, we have a problem with our auditors, they're about to put us before they didn't? Right. None. Right. Sorry, no, you might have answered that already, but I just want to be clear. They didn't give any assertion. And according to company law, they would have...
I'm not being unnecessarily chairmanship, but I think I wanted to ask questions to the Minister. We'll come back to you then for your questions to Sports Ireland.
Okay, does the Minister have to go now?
If you can answer questions, only...
Well, I just asked you, but am I coming back in directly then?
Yes, of course you are. No, hold on, I'm the chair here. Yeah. The next speaker is Senator
I was
Feighan.
next. I was next. I'm here since 12:30.
That's what I'm trying to find
I was next. I asked a question for a minute of the Minister to let the Minister go.
Sorry, Frankie, you're next on the list.
Yes.
What I'm trying to get through is there are 3 members, apart from yourself. You asked your question to the Minister, and then we go back to you in rotation. I'm just trying to make sure that nobody hasn't the opportunity
to ask the Minister.
Yes, that's why I said to Mr. Daly to ask the Minister. Yeah, that's just what I want to do. I'm not depriving anybody.
Is Frankie starting and then to Sports Ireland?
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's fine.
I'll just answer Senator Daly's question. I said I will consider the legislation and bringing in legislation. I haven't given the commitment, but I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what, Senator. Please don't interrupt. Just in the middle of the sentence, please.
Yeah, but we're here for 4 hours.
Just listen to the Minister, please.
We have a scandal in relation to football. We've had the Olympic Council, previously scandal. We have had boxing, the same issue. And all you're saying is, I'll consider it. Well, would not this be the day to say, I'll do it?
What I said was I would consider extra powers when I was asked that question earlier, and I think that's what you're referring to. You know, legislation isn't the cure to anything, but you're a legislator, Deputy Senator. You could bring in legislation, and I'd be very, very happy to consider any legislation you bring in about that, about this. If you've got...
Sorry, you're the Minister.
No, but you can bring it in as well.
Excuse me, you're the Minister.
Yeah, that's correct.
Are you asking me to be the Minister for Sport?
Do you ever introduce legislation?
I have brought in legislation.
I would welcome your input into
just
it.
to remind you, I just want to stray off the issue only last week. You gave me a reply in relation to an issue on driving licence of all things that actually had nothing to do with the legislation at all. So, Minister, I won't take over your job. I'm asking you to do your job.
Okay.
You've been asked to
for
give
certainty
powers
on the issue. For Sports Ireland Act 2015, Section 9, additional functions. After consulting with Sport Ireland, the Minister may, by order, assign to Sport Ireland such additional functions connected with the functions for the time being of Sport Ireland as the Minister considers appropriate for the achievement of its purposes. So you already have the power to do that. So that's clear. No, it's there. It's there in black and white.
Maybe if the Minister was aware of the legislation before he came in and gave us that answer.
Well, he's aware of it now, so I think that's...
Well, sorry, Minister, we're in here talking about a specific legislation on Sports Ireland Act, and you're asking me as a legislator to bring in more legislation to give you powers that you already have. Does that not say that that's a bit much? That you're supposed to come before the committee with solutions, not with problems?
What are they looking for legislation for if it's already there? I don't understand.
Well, you're the one telling me to go and bring in the legislation. You already have the power, Minister. Would you not, as the Minister, should you not be aware that you already have the power to give Sports Ireland the powers that they are asking for to prevent this from happening again? Would that be helpful?
Chair, Sports Ireland don't seem to be asking. They said earlier they don't want to be the regulator, right? So we actually need clarity on this because this is going on.
But there are additional powers that we could recommend to
They could, but I'm just saying they don't.
Do
we need a new organisation because Sports Ireland seem to be there? They want to be there to promote sport rather than regulate it.
Well, if it's helpful, sorry, Deputy, we can do a report on this and make recommendations.
Okay.
And that there will be significant follow-through. Now, I just want to deal with questions to the Minister, Sorry, Deputy O'Brien, if you have questions to the Minister, then I'll bring you in.
Deputy
after.
Griffin is staying, isn't he?
Pardon?
Deputy Griffin is staying.
Well, he's...
We're trying to get a replacement. I know I have to be in the Dáil for a motion and pre-clearance, I think. So we're trying to see if someone...
The thing is, both of you can't be in the Dáil at the same time.
He's in the Shannon.
Well, one is in the Shannon.
One's in the Shannon, one's in the Dáil.
So then they're saying they have a double for these type of situations. But.
Minister, maybe you shouldn't be rushing that aircraft noise bill through and you should just leave it back.
Okay, Deputy O'Brien, if you ask the Minister, and I'll bring you back for your minutes after that.
To be honest, I don't have a question for the Minister.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, I think that's fair enough. I want to make it clear for the record that I am being fair to everybody and you've been offered your time. And we'll come back. Sorry, yes, of course,
before it goes.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, of course.
Sorry,
and then Deputy Coppinger, yeah.
Minister, it's been alluded to earlier on that Mr Delaney is on gardening leave, one would expect, still in receipt of pay. We know that Sports Ireland has suspended their funding to the FAI. It's been reported that there's debts in the region of 28 million by FAI under Aviva payments, and they currently have 3 separate consultants' reports underway, all being paid for by the FAI. Have you a concern that the FAI is facing financial Armageddon?
I don't want to say anything irresponsible at all about that, but I will wait for the reports to come through. I have no reason for believing that there's anything so dramatic as that going on. I think they've had 3 years of surpluses, and unless there's something very wrong in the accounts, I'm presuming those are accurate.
So you're confident that there's no financial issues outstanding with this?
Oh, I'm not confident of that at all, but I'm not saying that, that's a very long way from saying it's facing Armageddon.
It's a big bill. No, sorry, you wish to ask questions, that's fine. Yeah.
Ask the Sports Ireland, so I might as well ask the Minister. Minister, the audited accounts for 2017 for the FAI are lodged with the company's registration office, to the best of my knowledge, in October 2018. Is that correct? Does anyone know? And that's why I wanted to ask Sports Ireland. But if you
can ask Sports Ireland after Minister's comments.
I know, but do you know if it's 2018, Minister, when the audited accounts are actually lodged with the company's registration office?
Yeah. I have the report for 2017, but there's no date on it.
I don't know, Deputy, but I can find out for you.
Okay.
It would be around that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you not find it strange that we are now only getting a report from the auditors that there is a serious issue in relation to the accounts and the practices? I mean, if you take it that the auditors signed off on the 2017 accounts, lodged them in October 2018, that it's only in the last week that they have raised concerns. And here's my question to you, Minister. And I understand if you don't want to answer it, but do you believe, or is it credible, that the auditors themselves were not given full financial documentation to enable them to carry out a full audit, a clear audit, and it is only in the last week that questions which were put to the FAI in relation to all of the information surrounding the €100,000 loan, the cheque stubs and all of that, was made available to the auditors, that they have now just twigged or copped on, hang on, there's a serious issue here, and we have an obligation under law to actually report that. And that's why the H4 form has only gone in the last number, well actually it was only went in yesterday, effective last Friday, which is only 2 days after that information became into the public domain on Wednesday's committee meeting. Would that be a credible assessment of the situation?
Deputy, yeah, I think you're right. I think it is. I don't want to attribute blame, and I won't, because that would be absolutely wrong. I think it is an extraordinary situation that we're facing, and it's quite stunning that there should be such a long time gap. The timing of this is something which is bizarre.
Okay. Thanks, John. I'll ask Sports Hour in a second.
Yeah, that's okay. Can we just ask the Minister, just to add to your question, could you report back to the committee, if you can, on the facts of that, if you can, or when you're...
I will inquire and
so that
I'll
we'll know
report
straight away.
As far as I can.
Insofar as you can. You make the formal
Insofar as I
request,
can,
yeah.
it has to be.
Okay, Deputy Coppinger.
For the Minister. Minister, given this crisis has been raging for 2 weeks at least in terms of the FAI and at this committee, so you should really know by now whether you're going to introduce or not new legislation. You should have thought about it. Now, given that you flew to Brazil and you got the runaround from Pat Hickey, given that we're getting the runaround from John Delaney, you know, this is not new, and you as Minister should have thought whether change is needed in terms of legislation. And the second, the B part of this question, do you think it's right at all that the taxpayer should be funding organisations that allow their CEOs have lavish salaries and expenses? Like the taxpayers plugging a hole here, and on the other end of the ship, there's a massive hole. You know, there is a serious question over that at all. So I'd ask you the two things. Do we need new legislation? And are we going to continue funding when these practices are in place?
Yeah. Maybe there might be a range that they couldn't go above, or something like that, or never, you know what I mean? It's a very important point.
Exactly.
Yeah, let me just answer Deputy Coppinger's point. The taxpayer funds are ring-fenced. They don't go to the salaries, the top salaries.
No, they don't, Minister, but you know the point I'm
Sorry,
making.
I
made it very clear.
Sorry, maybe, Deputy, let me answer your question. It's absolutely
But
clear
you're not answering it.
that they are ring-fenced. They don't go to the salaries of anybody.
We know.
That is clear. Well, you were asking me about taxpayer funding. The taxpayer funding goes to the programmes, and we are, as Minister Griffin said, we're determined that no one who benefits from those programmes shall suffer for good reasons, which I'm sure you'll share with me. That's
the Coppinger is making.
Very
It
important.
should be a sine qua non. In other words, there should be no monies paid unless salaries were in a certain given and predetermined range.
Yeah, getting
In
paid
other
more
words-
than the Taoiseach.
Yeah, in other words, yeah, no, absolutely.
And getting taxpayers'
I
money
mean,
at
I
the
think
same
that's a
time.
very reasonable question.
I think that's a reasonable question, and you know, we don't have a control over the salaries.
No, but you have, I think
We may
the point
have a-
deputies make that you don't pay the money if they're out of control. That's not it.
I think once
if they're
we
out
need-
of control.
There could be other sporting bodies that need the money more. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If they're going to continue allowing their CEO and others get those types of salaries, I think it's perfectly reasonable. Everyone is asking this outside this room.
Deputy Coppinger, if you want me to hurt the programmes, which will hurt the participants, which are mostly children, I'm not going to do that.
Sorry,
what
Chair.
What I am going to do is suggest that to you that I would be much happier. It's beyond my control if the next chief executive was paid a lot less.
Chair, just one sentence on that. It has been made clear here today by the junior minister himself that there is no need for children to suffer. This threat has been used, in my view, erroneously. And there's a separate fund that you could set up to allow clubs apply.
We're not threatening children.
Yeah.
We're not threatening clubs.
I'm sorry, I'm talking to the minister. The minister has just said
You just
that
referred to me.
children will
Sorry,
suffer.
sorry,
But
Chairman.
earlier you
The deputy just referred to me
Yeah.
and referred to threats.
Because
We're
you're
not
both
I went
contradicting
to
each
great
other.
lengths to emphasise we are absolutely not threatening local clubs. We're not threatening grassroots. On the contrary,
Yes.
our policy, and certainly in my time here in this department, my focus has been to try to roll out as much funding as possible to the grassroots, and so much so that the last Sports Capital programme was the first time ever that every valid applicant actually received funding. And we want to try to achieve that as much as possible
Just
into
to
the
say,
future,
I'm
but you're
gonna
misrepresenting what's being said
No,
here
the
completely.
two of you are
It's very
saying
irresponsible of you.
contradictory things.
You know?
On the one hand, and you're deliberately not answering the questions that I'm asking.
That's completely, no, you're deliberately
This thing about
misrepresenting what we're
threatening
saying
clubs
here.
has been used to prevent action being taken in the past, is what I'm saying. So stop saying it, you know.
I suppose as somebody who's here 17 years and I'm a junior member of this committee, I've allowed my time to be shared to allow people to a question to 2 ministers before they leave. I'd like to come in now on my 10 minutes after, since I've been here now.
Is that question to the minister?
No, I'm going to come in now. But I think the ministers at Sport Ireland, I'd like to come in.
1 second, Senator. Mark Daly, you want to, Senator Daly? Just to the minister.
Yeah, to the minister on the clear point. It's and Deputy Coppinger raised it as well. I mean, if we keep seeing chief executives of sporting organisations using the money, not money in their accounts for lavish expenses and for the payment of rent and all these other things, it is related to the fact that the taxpayer is plugging the hole. Because if they weren't spending the money flying to Rio and going on 5-star hotels and paying for their rent for their own places, then the taxpayer wouldn't have to plug that money in for those specific programmes to do with training kids in soccer, as should happen. But if the funding wasn't being misappropriated in a way that is extravagant, like there's no problem with people travelling as they should to represent the country for various events, but we can see that it's in excess. So I think that's the point we're all making. The issue we're struggling with here is, after all of this, not just the FAI, not just the boxing, not just the Olympics, which is only 3 years ago, we still have no proposal from the Department of Sport how to stop this. Like you're saying in relation to soccer, I look at it. Yet we already had the Olympics, and yet we still have nothing. Now, it's not our department, it's your department. Will you come back to the department with the changes you're proposing to stop this from happening again, so we won't have to be here again?
Okay. So, do you want to comment?
Well, I've already said I'll consider it.
Yeah, that's all you can say, is you'll only consider it.
5 times.
Right,
You have
Minister.
no plans. That's all right.
Deputy Munster. One for the minister.
I think what we need to know with absolute certainty today, given that all that's happened, that would the minister consider bringing in legislation that would actually be a condition of funding, or a condition of the reinstating of funding, that the board should step down? I mean, given all that's happened, that's what we want to know. That's the power that we need. I know he said he would consider extra powers, but if legislation is required, will he do that in terms of corporate governance? And that's what this is about. It's about corporate governance, the governance of the board of the FAI. For example, if the FAI were found to be in breach of the Companies Act, would he consider that to be sufficient to bring in legislation to say that funding will be withheld on such time as the board is replaced? Because that's the issue here. It seems to be as you were for the FAI board. And there's no accountability. And the only way, and I'll just say it on the basis of my observation today, was that Sport Ireland, what we've discovered so far is Sport Ireland is toothless. And in many aspects you've been played. The Minister himself has been played. He came in here and read out a statement today, or read out a letter today that gave the impression that the board is going to step down sometime soon. That might never happen. Why? Because of the fact that there's nothing to stop them. Nothing to stop them putting forward themselves for re-election come the AGM. And that's the biggest issue here. The biggest issue is the board. And I think it's something that we as a committee should maybe start to take control of. We could start by having hearings and do a report with an eye to legislation. Have people in, have clubs, players, fans. No, but just but to give the Minister and Sport Ireland the powers that they need in terms of corporate accountability, because it's clear from what we've seen today they haven't got it, and we're back to square one without it. So will the Minister consider bringing in legislation that gives that power to Sport Ireland to say we're withholding funding until such time as the board steps down in view of corporate governance, and also in relation to if they were deemed to be in breach of the Companies Act? That's what we need. That's what everybody wants to see.
Just in reply to Deputy Munster, and I think I've replied to this already. It's not as you were. You said it's as you were. Things have changed dramatically since yesterday. We have a declaration from the board, from the president of the FAI, that when a new structure has been put in place and he puts a date in it, July or before, it's the intention the existing board will step down to allow for a new board to be constituted in the best interests of football. That is not as you were. That is a long, long way from where we were yesterday. It's a long way from where we were a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and 3 weeks ago. And I welcome that statement.
Do you trust that they would adhere to that?
Sorry, please, Deputy. I'm just trying to answer your question. So I welcome that statement, and I think it is something which the Deputy ought to welcome as well. If you want to say you don't actually believe it, you're quite entitled to that. I anticipate this happening. I think it's a result of an enormous amount of pressure, which has been put on quite rightly by a large number of bodies and people, and including yourselves. And I congratulate you on that, Deputy Munster, as well. And I think it's a result. It's not a final result, but it's a result in its progress. And we are now beginning to see the end of the beginning of the end of the old FAI, and that is something which I welcome. I'm sorry, Deputy. I know the next item on in the Shannon I'm on after this one.
Brief question.
Can I ask the Minister, Minister, have you or any of your department officials made overtures to the governing bodies, UEFA or FIFA, to express the concerns within the state about the
I've made no representations. I've had no contact with either of them at any stage, as far as I know.
Do we plan?
Well, I'm not going to interfere with the process.
I think the questions for ministers are finished now. Is that okay? So the ministers may leave.
Thank you very much.
We might want you back now with all those facts, as they say, you know. Okay, thank you. Now, so we go. Sorry, yeah. I'm sorry, yeah.
I wouldn't be fully confident that the Minister is going to bring in any form of legislation that has some teeth, if you like, to correct the wrongs that have been done and for corporate accountability. So, as I said, when you were weren't here, that maybe we as a committee need to start examining ways and having hearings, bringing in, supporters, clubs, etc. Yeah. But in an effort to bridge the gap from a legislative point of view, so that we do have corporate governance and funding can be withheld. Because I mean, what we heard today is just toothless. Like,
I think on that point,
it's my opinion that they've been played.
If we were to ask through our clerk, and obviously Sport Ireland and the department should be able to assist us in best practice in other countries, number one, what changes you need now in your view, how you can prevent the issues that arose and the penalties that should arise if somebody has been told, if the Director of Corporate Enforcement has said they're not, that their books are not being properly kept, and if you're not told, that's absolutely unacceptable. The question around about auditors, who didn't audit the books, because if they were assigned audits and they did due diligence, these issues that are arising wouldn't have arisen or would have been copied or found out. So I agree absolutely. And if we, if we have a meeting, maybe.
Yeah, can I just make the point because. As Deputy Coppinger said,
I shared my time half an hour ago.
Deputy Coppinger has just said that.
I agree.
I'm here since I drove from Belfast today to be here for 12:30. I'm still here, and I still haven't got in. And I'm a long-standing member of this committee, so I'd like to get in. I did share my time, and people are coming back in about. And you're not giving a member of the government fair play.
Well, I think I'm very sorry that you feel that. You were lucky to be appointed by the former Taoiseach. I was elected by the people here, and I challenge you. I challenge you on that here. How dare you? How dare you say that?
Chair.
That's wonderful, Lord. You have to chair.
Sorry, I just
Chair, I won't even come back there, but I think I deserve an apology.
Yeah. Well, I think I deserve
an apology, Chair.
Yeah, well, I think you should
neither of you members of government.
Yeah. So you have 9 minutes, Senator.
Sorry, Cahirla, can I just finish my point there? Cahirla, just before I was interrupted, can I finish?
Oh, God almighty, come here. Senator Feighan has the floor.
Sorry, Cahirla, you interrupted myself mid-point.
Oh, for God's sake,
just finish it? Yeah, well, I mean, another minute won't matter too much if he's here. Right. Just Deputy Coppinger had referred to earlier with Sports Ireland had said that they're not interested in being the regulator. So I don't know whether you did it, purposely or not, but you referred it to Sports Ireland as regards finding a way. I meant the committee committee. I mean, if they're not interested in being a regulator, then we shouldn't go down that road of allowing Sport Ireland to come up with ideas for legislation and empowering from a corporate governance point of view. We as a committee should take charge of this, because it's clear that the Minister doesn't really, well, he hasn't displayed any intention of correcting this.
Yeah. Okay. Senator Feighan. Okay. Senator Daly, you're next then.
Thanks, Chairman. Just a number of questions on the specifics. At that meeting last night, they didn't tell you that the auditors were coming, or that the auditors were going to file that paperwork with the company's registration office, that there may be issues of concern with the accounts. So they didn't tell you that. Did they give you the original terms of reference for the Mazars report?
2 minutes here. You've already spoken for 10. I'm informed here. Sorry.
But they didn't tell us that their auditors had filed, at that particular time, with the office. So we weren't told. We found out this morning from our legal representatives, who provided the information in an email to us this morning. Right? When we got that information, we called the chairman of the committee and provided that information to him, because we were only hearing it a couple of hours earlier.
Yeah, just so, my concerns on the issue is that we have terms of reference which we were told last week about Grant Thornton, and they have a terms of reference from the FAI. So do Mazars. And now, are they going to allow you to write the terms of reference for this review, or are they going to write the terms of reference and then tell you about them?
They showed us terms of reference that they had developed with Mazars, right, during the course of a meeting. And they were very detailed, and they called it an investigation, senior counsel input, and they had identified areas to examine, which would have been the areas that would have been covered in the Sunday newspapers.
Yeah, and finally on this one, my concern on all of this is we were given information last week when the FAI were here from the FAI president, and we were told that Grant Thornton were quite happy with the information we were getting in relation to the 100,000 loan and its payment and all of that. My concern on this is, and it goes back to what Mr. Mulvey said, is who's auditing the auditors? We had the exact same problem with banks, where auditors were signing off on accounts wholesale, and yet it's always the taxpayer who is picking up the tab when the auditors go, oh, you know what, we got that wrong. I think in this instance it is simply unacceptable, and it's up to yourselves. If you're comfortable that Grant Thornton and Mazars are going to do the job, even though the people paying them are the FAI and the people writing the terms of reference is the FAI, I think we need to be concerned that in essence you're in charge and you should write the terms of reference, and if you have to, pay the cheque. But like, the problem here is we've got information drip fed to us from both of those in one way or the other through through the FAI and others, that now is questionable, and I'm concerned that they could continue now to be in the position where they're now also reviewing themselves, because they'd provided information to us that is of concern.
Okay, Deputy O'Brien.
Thanks, Chair. And I don't have...
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Do you want to answer the question? Sorry.
Yeah, Senator Daly, the issues you raised are the issues that we're concerned about. We had this engagement with the FAI last night. Now, one of the difficulties was the timeline kept changing, because there were other issues the FAI were involved in an alternative hotel, which are known to us all. We were shown the terms of reference for the Mazars review, and our team here looked at them, the four of us here looked at them. They are extensive and they appear to us to be rigorous, but we haven't completed our discussions around them. Neither have they completed their discussions, as I understand it, and was led to believe last night, with the Office of Corporate Enforcement. In regard to, and it was raised earlier by, I think, Deputy Munster in particular, our view, given what happened last night, and we were not told about, and we've had to now take the view that whatever Mazars do or Grant Thornton do, we will have to be assured as the state agency involved here, and given all that has gone on, that we conduct our own independent audit, forensic or otherwise, whatever term we want to use, but it would have to be, you know, forensic, if we want to use that, as to what they're reviewing and what they're involved in, because I have to accept on what has been said here. We can't rely on this anymore. Neither as the committee, as your own experience. We will have to be satisfied ourselves through our own auditor, externally appointed by us, that the information that's been provided by the other auditors, sorry, it's like some of the phrases earlier, fair play and playing the ball and playing around the ball. I was wondering where we were for a while.
Potentially going to be auditing the auditors.
Yeah, we're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to give our auditors rigorous instructions in regard to this. So we're not made fools of, and we don't make fools of you when we come to report back to you.
O'Brien.
That's the bizarre thing in all of it. We don't even know if the auditors were given full information by the board to enable them to carry out the first audit. So you could be auditing a flawed audit for all we know. And I don't have too many questions because, to be honest, I think the people who need to answer the questions were here last Wednesday and refused to do so. They actually did themselves no good, and they did sport in general a real disservice. And their actions since doesn't inspire me with any confidence that they are going to change direction and do what's right. So I don't know where it goes from here in terms of yourselves, because there's a couple of things that I know that you cannot do, which need to happen. For instance, there needs to be a forensic audit of the FAI. Okay? Nobody can force them to do that, not Sports Ireland or not the Minister, regardless of what anyone in this committee says. That is the facts. The only people who can do that are the FAI board. They are the only people who can decide to have a forensic audit. Would that be correct?
The Minister has the power, I think, under the additional functions under the existing Act, to give power to consult with Sport Ireland. He may assign to Sport Ireland such additional functions connected with the functions for the time being of Sport Ireland as the Minister considers appropriate for the achievement of its purposes. So I think that might be the vehicle.
Yeah, I don't know, can he do that?
I don't.
Well, let's find out. Let's find out. Sorry, just say that. Yeah.
It's my understanding that he can give you additional powers to carry out functions in relation to the spending of public money. But we're talking about an organisation which needs a forensic audit right across. And I don't believe he has the power, and maybe you can correct me, Mr Mulvey or Mr Tracy, that he has the power to give you, nor do you have the power to insist on that type of forensic audit. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Deputy, you're quite correct legally, but yesterday evening we clearly indicated to the FAI, and we got their agreement to conduct the kind of audit we want to conduct. We needed their agreement to it because legally we don't have the power. But I think this circumstances transcends nice legalities. There's a public interest at stake here involving one of our most prominent sports organisations that competes domestically and internationally. Our international reputation, just like the OCI, OFI, is at stake here, and I think we have to take a far bigger umbrella view of this, and we must do it. And one of the reasons I said earlier is, in the context of this, that if we don't do it, who's going to do it? And it can't be left in abeyance.
And what we will do is we will feed back to the FAI, if they're not watching today, what the demands of this committee are, right? And we will feed that back to them. And we will push the boat out as far as we can with them, without a shadow of a doubt. You can take that as a given.
Because I'm becoming increasingly frustrated. We had a situation last Wednesday where an individual who was 2 weeks in the job was actually under more pressure at this committee than somebody who had previously held a position within the FAI for about 15 years. That just shows you the level of dysfunctionality within the system. We now have a situation where 2 board members are gone, a further 8 board members have indicated they're going to step down, and the individual at the centre of all the controversy is only stepping aside. I mean, we're going around in circles here, in my opinion. There are certain individuals who have the power to actually bring this to a conclusion. John Delaney being the prime one. He needs to step aside. End of story. He needs to resign. If there is issues around the board being able to fire him from his position, then that's for them to resolve. I don't even know. I mean, there's so many questions, but again, you don't have the answers. For instance, has John Delaney even signed a new contract of employment as Executive Vice President? Do we even know that?
We don't know that.
Did he get a severance package when he stepped down as CEO?
We asked that question and the answer was no.
He got no severance package.
We asked that specific question, Deputy, and we were told, no, he did not receive a severance package.
They said that at the meeting last week.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay.
Has he drawn a pension as a position as CEO?
51. God, if he... I don't know if he is, to be honest.
Deputy Murphy, if we wrap up, you're finished. Oh, yeah, sorry.
The question I asked the Minister, I want to ask Sports Ireland. In relation to the FAA accounts 2017, which was submitted in October 2018, signed off by the auditors, do you not find it strange that it took till last week for the auditors to realise there was an issue which needed to be brought to the attention of the CRO? Would it be a fair assessment that maybe they were not given all of the relevant information? And in your opinion, the 2 reviews which are being undertaken by Grant Thornton and Mazars, will they actually be able to determine whether the board gave all of the relevant financial documentation to the auditors to enable them to sign off on accurate accounts?
The answer to your first part of your question is yes. I think we find it extraordinary. The answer to the second part of your question, Deputy, is I am expecting, given what I've seen, but what further engagement, that Mazars have to get to the bottom of this in the context of being the auditors brought in, given the questions. But we're going to have to interrogate Mazars as well. That the objective of this exercise is to ensure there's full transparency in the transactions of the FEI in regard to the issues that have arisen.
Ye are feeding into the terms of reference for the Mazars report, yes?
Yeah, we're given a view on it.
One of those views, which I would respectfully suggest should be given to the FAI, is that all documentation is given to Mazars, including check stubs.
I just want to try and get this right now. If I'm right, I've called everybody in the order which we agreed before we started. I've attempted to make sure the Minister was asked all the questions he could be asked before he left. So I think I've been fair to everybody, and I just... Yeah, just 1 second, sorry. I just want to try and finish in the fairest possible way. The charge that was made against me about being political is not true, because the person that raised all of this was actually Deputy Murphy. And we made sure that you actually were the lead in all of this. And there's nothing fairer than that, because you insisted months ago on having this meeting. And, so I just want to try and finish this fairly to everybody. Everybody has spoken now, so I suggest we do 5 minutes with each person, if that's okay. But Deputy, if you have one outstanding question, or do you want to make that part of your 5 minutes? Pardon?
Am I go first?
Well, no, okay, we'll start with Deputy Murphy then.
Okay. Just in relation to the Mazars report, some things I'd like to flag. For example, one of the big issues is, it's 5% of the public money is coming through Sport Ireland is for the FA is public money, and we have a responsibility to hold you know, your organisation to account on that. But there is the public's money as well, and the public's money is, you know, in merchandising and ticketing and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that is a constant and understandable criticism is that the AGM is such a closed affair. I think that absolutely has to change from this year, and that needs to be put into the list of things. I think there needs to be safeguards in relation to the elections, that they're, you know, that they're open and fair, and I think that has to be crafted properly in advance of the AGM. There's no mention of other skills. There may well be a need to look at other skill sets that are required to bring this organisation into kind of a modern organisation that really has the capacity to deal with things. And it may well be that the nature of the officerships has to have a certain credential, if you like, in terms of skill sets, or at least a mix of skill sets. I just noted about the Deloitte. We got a reply from the FAI, and they said that there was 430,000 contained in Note 20 of the 2016 financial statements. I looked at actually the 4 years, 2014 to 2018, in relation to their accounts. Pretty sad life I live, and essentially, some of it looks like it's a copy and paste. In relation to, for example, related parties. There's the same figure each year, and that just doesn't sound, it doesn't look right to me, and I particularly ask that is looked at. The other issue I think that's important is that there has been an absence of people who have felt that they could come forward in relation to whistleblowing, in relation to you know, maybe there being a consequence for their club if they raise something. That culture has to change, and I think that there will have to be something specifically around that in relation to Mazars, because that kind of internal whistleblowing is really important if you're going to change the culture. And I'd ask you as well to make sure that is something that is addressed in the Mazars report to the extent that it can be. I understand that the FAI Council can remove the board. I think that has been, that they can call an EGM, and it's possible to do that. So they were bypassed very much with the Jonathan Hall report. This was a new position that was set up. They had no hand or act or part. I asked last week, and I was told they weren't consulted and they didn't need to be consulted. That's just plain wrong. And you yourselves talked about there's only one CEO, and I think the lines of responsibility are going to have to be very well defined. Just interested in knowing who pays for the audit that you'll have to organise to carry out. I know you do it on every 3 years, but this would be more extensive. So it'll be Sports Ireland, and is there sufficient in the funds to to carry this kind of an audit out?
There is, but if there isn't, Deputy, I'd be asking Ken for give the Minister's side of the percentage.
No. Okay.
There is. We assure you, we want to keep control, and we will pay.
Right, and I mean, several people have said that, there's, instead of money...
4 minutes are up, so there's another minute to go.
Right, and just my last point is, there's several reports being done. The Mazars report looks like a very extensive piece of work. You have Grant Thornton report, you have the Jonathan Hall report. There's oodles of legal advice, certainly there yesterday. A lot of money has been spent that should be spent on sport. I think that, I think that should be a lesson that's learned in terms of other organisations. If you don't get this right, there is actually a physical cost in trying to retrofit a solution. And I think, if you can place the blame anywhere. It has to be on the board of the FAI, because they should have had the control of this. Would you agree that that's the case?
Okay, 5 minutes, Catherine. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Deputy Rock,
Okay.
will we take it? Yeah, Deputy Rock, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you both for coming in today. I appreciate your time and your frankness to the answers. With regard to might be me actually. Sorry, Chair. With regard to last night's meeting, do we have minutes of this meeting? Do we have a list of attendees?
Yeah, we have a list of attendees.
Do we have minutes?
Yeah, we have.
Can they be supplied to the committee?
Yeah, we'll supply them to the committee later on.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
With regard to the Mazars terms of reference, you've seen a draft of it, is that correct?
Yes.
Can that be supplied to the committee?
No, we don't have it.
So you've seen it, but you don't.
We've seen it. It was still in. They made a particular point of us reading it and looking at it and seeing
not keeping it,
and handing it back because they're in discussions with corporate enforcement. And to be honest with you, Deputy, given what I saw and read, my view was that's the place it should reside.
So you'd rather not see that? Does that mean the corporate enforcement?
No, it's just we don't have the authority
Sure.
to do that, and it's more appropriate to them because it relates to issues that relate, in my opinion, to company law and transactions that need to be reported in audit reports, and there may have been explanations or not appropriate explanations. So it wasn't our area of expertise.
I accept that answer.
Yeah.
I accept that answer. You said in the previous round of answers to me that credit card transactions will be looked at. Do we have a sense of timescale? We know Mr. Ty from the Sunday Times story looked at 6 months of transactions, €40,000. Will there be a longer timescale looked at, I assume?
Mazars, the terms of reference said there'd be an interim report, which would be 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
But we feel that this will take quite some time.
Pardon me now, forgive me for phrasing it incorrectly. A timescale for what they're looking at, what years they're looking at, rather than timescale for delivery.
I don't recall that. No, I don't recall it. No.
Okay.
I think it is, Chairman. Yeah. We had just sight of it, and I was trying to think. Yeah, but
yes.
Can I make the point? You're putting so much faith in Mazars, and yet, and I'm not being rude to you. Let's make the point. You don't have a copy of what you were shown.
Not yet.
And you don't know what years they are, but you expect everybody, and I'm not doubting the integrity of your position, that you expect everybody to believe that's okay without you seeing it, without having a copy of it, without knowing what years are
Yeah,
involved.
it has to be agreed with us.
Yeah,
Chairman.
But
they
want
want
discussion.
Sorry, I've interrupted.
I would expect this would be within the next 2 or 3 days, Chairman.
And when that's provided to you, can we see a copy of it at that point in time, then, those terms of reference?
Yeah, we should be able.
I mean, while you might not accept that certain line items on the terms of reference are within your own purview.
If that's your wish, we'll make that clear. Yeah.
You know, I suppose the broader point I'm trying to drive at here, and thank you, Chair, is while certain line items within the terms of reference may not be within your own expertise or your own purview, I would see it as valuable from the Sport Ireland's perspective that those terms of reference, that you at least have a copy of them and get to sign off on them, and that's the agreed process. But similarly, I believe there would be no harm in us as a committee being able to see those line items as well. Yesterday evening, by the time you met the FAI, 2 board members had stepped aside. Why didn't all board members who were aware of a breach in company law step aside? And there was a list that came before the committee based on my answers last week, including the interim CEO, who admitted that she was aware of it in passing. Why didn't people such as that step aside? Why did the honorary treasurer step aside who was not aware?
We don't know the answer to that question. We know that 2 people resigned. We would imagine that they might have signed off on other things in the past. We're not quite sure.
It would seem like an avenue worth pursuing, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Sunday Times, Mark Ty's story again. Paragraph 4 referenced third-party payments. We discussed those in passing earlier on. I just want to absolutely confirm that will be an avenue of inquiry
Yes.
In any forensic audit or any review by Mazars undertaken?
In the terms of reference we read, that's clearly there.
Third-party transactions.
Good. You can understand why I would feel that's an issue of significant importance.
Mark might tell us in the meantime what they are.
Indeed. I wouldn't want to call Mr. Tighe before the committee. Absolutely. Right.
We don't know who you are.
Can Sport Ireland, you perhaps issue the committee with an indicative timeline of sorts? I mean, you can perhaps understand there are a lot of moving parts, a lot of reviews taking place.
1 minute left.
Thank you very much. Many of which are in parallel. I mean, can you issue us with some form of indicative time? For example, you said, to my earlier question, 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, I imagine at some stage there might be a document compiled that Mazars will report on X date, ODCE commenced their investigations on Y date, etc., etc.
I had a feeling that from reading the terms of reference there was a number of modules to it. So it was my reading it was going to take a while.
Yes.
That was my impression.
When you get a sense as this develops, can you provide the committee with some form of a timeline?
We can ask and provide the information to the committee.
I appreciate that.
I think there's an imperative around the Chairman Deputy is that we have to make decisions around the funding, the continued funding to vital programmes. And I think that will help to concentrate, hopefully, the minds of the FAI wonderfully around this.
I agree. I agree with that entirely. In closing,
Deputy Troy.
Yes, in closing, Chair.
No, but I'm not being anything other than actual. You've been talking for 7 minutes on the 5, so I've no problem. But I will have to get the other people in.
Okay. Well, I just want to close on this point, if you don't mind, Chair. If you'll indulge me for 30 more seconds. Deputy Murphy made a point about copy and paste in the accounting, and I completely agree with that, and I think it's an avenue worth looking at. In the Companies Act 2014, Section 281 and 282, under the belief of Deloitte, have been, how would you say, contravened. Under Section 392 of the Companies Act, it effectively says that the company being audited will be notified 7 days before submission is made to the CRO. Indeed.
It can be shorter than that period.
Well, look.
Yeah, no, because that's I asked that question earlier.
Pardon me.
Yeah, no,
if you did.
Yeah.
My apologies entirely.
Yeah.
I'll conclude on that repeat note in that case. So, Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Deputy Troy.
Thank you. Can I ask, did any other of the board members offer the resignation?
We're not aware of any other board members offering the resignation. Only what we read in the paper that there was another board member thinking of it.
Okay. I think the very fact that you met with the board last night and they withheld key information again, which you've confirmed on a number of occasions to my colleagues, is a pure indication that the FAI continue to give two fingers to Sports Ireland. That the FAI continue to drive the agenda, to set the pace. And even today, it was them who wrote in at the 11th hour to the Minister. It's on their terms and their conditions. You say you have had a cursory look at the terms and conditions of the Mazars report. When will you sign off on the terms and conditions of the Mazars report?
When they said they would bring that terms of reference to the ODCE. They will bring it back to us, and we will sign off on it in that point.
And in the event that the terms and reference do not meet with your approval, what course of action are you going to take?
We had a good look at the terms of reference, and I thought they were very extensive from the look that I took, and around many of the points that were raised in here today.
Okay.
But some of the points that were raised here today, we'll feed those into Mazars as well.
Because
Deputy Murphy was
some
raising.
of the points I think Deputy Murphy made around that relate to the corporate governance, the AGM, the conditions. We're more reassured that our person will be chairing that and will be nominating an independent director. So we'll technically have a majority on that.
So is it the review of the corporate governance which you have appointed the independent director
Yes.
to now? Is it waiting on that to be concluded in advance of the July AGM, or an EGM in advance of that? Or is it a case that we're waiting for the Mazars report to be concluded before the board step down?
I think it's the corporate governance piece that needs to be done, which will chart how the board will be selected in the future and what skills you're looking for. That piece of work is really really important in getting that done before the AGM.
So that's the piece of work.
That's
And
one
acknowledge-
piece of work that really does need to be done. Yeah.
Okay, and are you setting a time limit in terms of when that is going to be done? Because, forgive me, they had a corporate governance committee established in January 17. Now, except there's an awful lot more attention from the media and from political representatives and from yourselves at this stage.
Yeah.
But is there a timeline in terms of when that report will be concluded?
Well, there'll be a timeline because there'll be demands for funding. There's nothing like a deadline to focus the mind. And as I said, Sport Ireland has nominated the chair. In essence, that will be agreed with the chair and the subcommittee, and they'll get on with their business. And they'll know exactly what they need to do. The IPA we will support the IPA in putting the resources in to get it done as quickly as we possibly can.
Okay. Just in relation to the Mazars report and the terms of reference, you said you feel from memory.
Yeah.
And I would would have felt that, you know, coming in today, it shouldn't just be memory. You should have sought a copy, even if you weren't to share with it today, but that you could have referred to it on your desk and said, yes, that's in it, instead of from memory. But I was contacted, and I'm sure many others have been contacted by concerned employees or former employees, and by one former employee of a company who has traded with the FAI for decades. And that arrangement persisted for decades by virtue of the fact that there was backhanders paid. Now,
just make the point here that that's out of remit in that terms.
But what I'm questioning, what
I have to just in the role as our role as a state, as a parliament, that I would ask him that I put it to you that you don't have to answer that question. Because it may identify other issues.
Yeah. But I don't think it's going to identify anything.
No, I'm not being. I'm just.
Chairman, I accept what you're saying. I accept what you're saying. And I accept what you're saying, Chairman. And I accept your no knowledge. Not for a second I'm insinuating that you have knowledge.
I accept
that.
Deputy.
But what I am saying is that there are other things out there.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And every Sunday, thanks to investigative journalism, not thanks to the work done by Sports Ireland, but thanks to investigative journalism, we are aware of what's going on in the FAI. Yeah. It is a moving ship. How can we have confidence that a board how can we have confidence that the terms of reference will encapsulate all that is needed to be encapsulated? Vis-a-vis the example I'm after giving.
Can you refer those through the Minister to us?
We can
in other words, when they're available.
We can refer those.
Once we get them.
Yeah, we did write a letter to the FEI, which was the second letter we wrote to them. And we asked in the letter, is there any other matters that you need to inform us of? And they did say there was other matters that were being referred to the ODCE.
So I take Deputy Coppinger now, if that's okay.
And that's what we're talking about.
I'd say you'd rather run a marathon now than continue with this malarkey.
I thought this was a marathon.
Yeah, exactly.
It's only a half day for us.
I have to say I'm similarly surprised that we don't have a bit more information, because we keep hearing this Mazars review, and yet we don't actually know exactly what it's reviewing. But there's some specific things that I would like you to take back whenever you next meet the FAI. Last week we were sitting here and Mr. Delaney made a statement, but we weren't allowed to ask him about these things. But I think now you have to be able to, and this review has to be able to. So, for example, he said that he got his loan repaid back to him on the 16th of June 2017. There was a board meeting, coincidentally, 3 days later, and he said, quote, the 100,000 payment did not arise. I wonder why, as if it was just, Anyway, 2 other people on the board, including the chairman, were told about it. Does it not strike you as incredible that neither of the 2 of them said anything? In other words, they must have been sworn to secrecy and told not to say anything, because why you wouldn't, as the chairman of the board, announce that to the board. And I think this goes to corporate governance from your point of view. The board was also not told till March, which only arose because of a pending media story. But they didn't tell us here at this committee for a month, by the way, that they were only told in March. They came in here and they released a statement, which they'd known about this for a month. And they still don't know who sent the press release out, saying otherwise. The fact as well that at internal finance meetings, which 3 people attended who took this decision, there's no minutes of such meetings. Normally in any organisation I've ever been involved in, a subcommittee reports to the main board executive or board. That doesn't seem to happen in the FAI, especially a finance committee always reports to any executive. So these are just things which do defy kind of belief. That these sort of practices were taking place. So I think that these are key issues. And just finally, it's kind of on a couple of things Mr. Tracy said earlier about the type of board I think is necessary. I said I thought that there should be reps of, players, supporters, the general public. And I think you made a comment about putting people, tracksuits on boards doesn't necessarily mean they have the business acumen, right? I think, in fairness, that's treating ordinary people with a bit of a level of... people have a lot more capability now than that. We have a huge level of educational attainment, but also I'm not for a minute suggesting you just plant somebody on a board. Obviously you need abilities. I can think of loads of football, I'll let you answer, sorry, loads of football people who I would think would have ability and integrity to go on that board. And
can I maybe just answer you? Right. With respect, Deputy, I totally accept there's a lot of people that have tracksuits, have huge abilities, right? But my experience is we get a lot of people that sit on boards of governing bodies that come up through a system and they don't know corporate governance. They don't know how a board should operate. That's been some of the experiences that we've had down through the years. So I just want to make sure that, and what we do like to see is people coming up through the system that knows the system extremely well, right? But they need the skills as well, and they need to know what their responsibilities are.
I appreciate that, but I don't know any ordinary person who isn't involved in a club that doesn't know there's meant to be minutes of meetings, that doesn't know you're meant to report a massive shortfall in funds to the main. So I really, they couldn't be doing any worse than the people who are so-called experts. And lastly, it's just this issue of funding. The ministers seem to be either deliberately or whatever misinterpreting my point. I wasn't suggesting that public funding is going to anybody's lavish salary. We know it's kept separate, but the point about it is I think we have to question a continuation of public funding for organisations that seem to allow executives of various officials of various kinds have ready access, profligate access to credit cards, to top hotels, to lavish salaries. I I mean, I absolutely appreciate the massive health and social benefits of sport and fully support that. But I would question that but there are other participative sports that if the FAI and other organisations aren't going to keep that in check, there's plenty of others who need the money as well. I'm sure girls' basketball is very participative, by the way. Every school has a basketball court. It's just often it's put out there that the GAA
if you're saying
and
there's a
soccer...
marking scheme and there's very low marks if there's very high pay in that context, so as it puts them up there. Yeah, that's a fair point, that the assessment will be based on a number of governance issues, including salary and expenses and that end of the business. Can I take Shandor O'Céidigh?
Pádraig, I'll just be very brief. I'm going to start off by saying that I believe, Chair and CEO, that you and your team are going to, I believe you're going to do a very good job in helping and doing a great favour for soccer in Ireland. I just want to say that. And I think everybody here are confident in that, quite frankly. I would ask you, actually, just back to follow on from Deputy Coppinger's point there, I look at the statement from the 10th of April from Mr. Daly. He said, Tuesday 25th of April 2017, internal finance meeting, which the Deputy referred to, saying that they were strapped for cash. They didn't have enough money. I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. Following day, he was in Geneva, received a call, we need 100 grand from you to keep going. This is an organisation with 50 million turnover in the accounts 2017. We don't have 2018 yet. So he wrote a cheque for 100 grand. The board weren't informed until after Mr. Ty, and fair play to him, contacting the FAI in relation to the matter. Then the board were informed about it, and actually that's what they mentioned the last time. I have the question, what happened if Mr. Delaney didn't have the money? Didn't have 100 grand to write a cheque? The FAI are insolvent.
Insolvent.
Absolutely insolvent. That's the FAI gone.
Yeah.
So it is. And quite frankly, ye have not been told or informed as per the agreement in relation to what the situation is. You're there with your hands tied behind your back. It's an incredible situation. 50 million, give us 100 grand there, no bother. And it's going to keep you going. They're insolvent. There's no need to go into the company law issues in relation to that, but we know they're quite substantial. And also I know, and you made the point very clearly the week before last, you're not a regulator. But in relation to that, and I don't think, in my view, I don't think you should be a regulator. It's not your role. And also, UEFA and FIFA, I think, would have a huge issue with that because they regulate soccer worldwide, and that could be a serious conflict. So you've a narrow enough remit within which you can operate. But I believe you can, and I believe the commitment is there actually to go and make it happen. I go back to I think it's really important to reflect on what have you learned from this? What did you do right? What could you have done better? And I'm saying this in the total positiveness to say, okay, because there's the past, we cannot dwell on the past, we learn from the past. And then we say, we're in the present, we have to create the future. And I'm really concerned about the vacuum. And I would suggest, Chair, if it's okay, that we invite Mr. Tracy and Mr. Mulvey back again in a couple of months' time to say, this is what happened since, and this is what we're doing in relation to filling the vacuum and helping soccer in Ireland to be world-class again. And that's all I have to say.
Dr. O'Keefe. And then we'll finish. I'll just say a few words.
First of all, Chair, while we're in here, we have to admit that down through the system of the chain of command, they feel that they are functioning away. And last night alone, I attended the Federation of Irish Sport and the Irish Sport Industry Awards, and still, as we hear given about the FAI, 3 or 4 of their supported projects were nominated for awards, 1 or 2 won, actually, and congratulations. But what I want to say, Chair, is what started out on the 17th of March as a question of accounting practices and procedures, has become seemingly and rightly so a major purging of the sport organisation. And I have to put my hand up and say big changes are needed, and how we go about it is for, I suppose, the FAI for themselves to decide. But obviously, with the pressures from the Sport Ireland, from this committee, from the departments of transport and tourism and sport to exert the proper pressure. But I suppose, you know, we have to rely on the grassroots up along the line, how it works, like, you know, and, you know, people are critical here today of directors' performances and so forth, like, you know, and that's all down to implementation of good governance and that, you know, and how it's operated and so forth. And I give the example, like, you know, I come from Knockcock, a big farming area, like, you know, and we have a major success with co-op in our backyard, like, you know, and the board members of that company, which turns over not 50 million, 10 times or 4 times that, and many of those board members just come up through the army, probably someone just went to national school or secondary school, but through the help of the organisation, they're funded, educated, before they go on the board to take education, to become directors of a company. And I think we should not lose sight of that. You don't have to be a blooming lawyer or an accountant or a successful businessman here in Dublin, like, you know, to be a board member of any of these companies. Like, you know, I think we should allow people to become board members, provided they're properly educated, and go for the training courses, like in any respect. Like, and I think we should take a board of that. Just 1 or 2 questions for Sport Ireland. Like, you know, you made recommendations, or did you ask Mazard to take on board some other terms of reference as well? Like, you know, did you know, you said you saw it in terms of reference.
That only occurred late last night, Deputy, but we have to return to a meeting with the FEI regarding the Mazars. They were engaged through their legal people with the Office of Corporate Enforcement, so we will have another engagement with them, and we've taken careful note of what members of the committee have said that they'd like to see within that. So that only developed last night.
Right. In your dealings with the FEI, like, do you think that that they bit off too much in you know the previous CEO was coming in getting up and going the project of getting the Aviva Stadium up and running, but do you think they bit off too much of the cake in trying to finance the structure, and maybe lost sight of other, not more important, but other projects related to the development of football in this country, that maybe that has been a pulling factor in it? Because, you know, through the chair, and I'll be blunt here with it, everybody's boasting that the IRFU got their debt in order and straight away, like, you know. But you must know who plays football, who plays rugby. Yeah. 2 different sources of means of income to their pockets. Way different. Many people, and I know younger days, who follows rugby, who follows football, the source of income or earnings are way different, and maybe that's where the problem arose first day, that maybe the FEI took on too much of a burden in trying to match our view in the running of the Aviva Stadium. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll just make a few points in closing. That I want to thank the witnesses for attending, the Minister, his department, the staff, Sports Ireland, all our colleagues here, our colleagues who worked very hard. I'm very impressed with the actual commitment everybody has here to accountability. I just want to say a few small, short points. Worries I have, the CEO, you know, the appointment of the CEO at this crisis point, who's going to manage that, who's going to sit in the board, will the old board be doing it, will the new board? I think there are huge issues there, because whoever that person is will obviously be driving the organisation in whatever direction they will decide into the future. I just say you want to be very careful on that. The question of Director of Corporate Enforcement, I believe, needs to seize control of this process. I believe using Mazars, notwithstanding their excellence, is not the way to go, because they're being paid by the FAI. They're really a third party. The office ought to have its own team to do the business, or to appoint their own team. I think the light has been pointed out by Deputy Rock and other people here. I think they have serious questions to answer. It is absolutely unacceptable that they passed accounts and subsequently there seems to be an issue with them. The point is, and the key point here, and it's probably the most important point in a way, everybody at the meeting last night from FAI knew that you would know this all today about the light. They all knew that, but they didn't tell you. And I just wonder what happened in the last number of hours before you knew, or why didn't they tell you? You know, it just doesn't make sense. The whole thing doesn't make sense. And I am concerned about, separately about records, about bookkeeping, about all that stuff. And I think you need to make sure, or the Director of Corporate Enforcement needs to make sure that there's total accountability, and there must be protocols in place before any of these files can be accessed as and from now. because otherwise, you know, I would have grave concerns. Finally, I just want to say that what this committee shows is that in democracy it does work. It worked particularly well today because you are accountable to us. It didn't work last week, even though the outcome was very negative for the people who refused to give witness, who refused to talk, who refused to tell us the questions that we had. And I think the ultimate issue for me here is that we need to reform the committee system. We need to have more powers. We need to look at possibly another referendum. The powers and capacities of us as committees to compel witnesses in or to compel them to answer questions where there are serious issues has to be changed. And I think that's what the public want, but we must frame that in a way that gives, gives fair play to all of those witnesses, whoever they might be, and due process. But I want to thank you all for coming. Our next joint committee is adjourned until 10 a.m. on the 8th of May 2019, and I wish everybody a happy Easter. Okay, thank you.